Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Every day, the approach of fall became more and more tangible. This time of the year always caused Clara an incomprehensible longing. She involuntarily summed up in her mind the preliminary results, trying to highlight the pros and cons of another year lived. This habit appeared to her not by chance. Thanks to the profession of her husband Chuck, with whom they lived almost 40 years before retirement, worked as a chief accountant. In the man's labor book, there were only 2 entries. The first, with the date of hire, had been made a long time ago. The second was only a few years ago, when the man took a well-deserved retirement. It is noteworthy that after his retirement, the farm ceased to exist, and its lands and buildings were bought by one of the new millionaires. Chuck Corver wholeheartedly supported the main business of his life, and often told his wife Clara. And they also say that nothing depends on one person. I had to leave, so our collective farm went down the drain. If I had been in my place, I would not have allowed this outrage to happen. The woman was skeptical of such statements of her husband and did not miss the opportunity to once again prick his ego. "Oh, Chuck, listen to you. So it turns out that you alone kept the household, wasn't it? I was in charge of all the bookkeeping. All the numbers were in those hands." Corver vigorously shook his calluses with those hands to make his speech have the desired effect on his eternally mocking wife. Well, Clara had not been the last person in the household in the not-too-distant past either. She started as an ordinary milkmaid, and after graduating from veterinary school was appointed head of the farm. Therefore, the woman rightly believed that she also made a tangible contribution to the common cause. Despite frequent disputes, the elderly spouses lived soul to soul. The children grew up and scattered from their native home, but did not forget their parents. Yesterday, the eldest daughter called to warn them of her arrival. "Mom, we're leaving on Friday. We'll visit you for a couple of days. Don't get ready, we won't be here for 3 or 4 days." This news made me both happy and sleepy at the same time. Clara said to her daughter with undisguised bitterness, "You always only visit your parents." No, to rest, to give the children a chance to breathe clean air. You're in a hurry, you're flying somewhere. And even scientists confirm that the best vacation where there are no factories and plants. My daughter grinned at the other end of the bridge. "Mom, do you even believe what you just said?" "No, I don't deny that the places in our Maria are amazing. But will Daddy give us a break? We're all for him, including Vanya. With Lisa, it's free labor, and he's sure to hand us rakes, scythes, and other tools right at the gate. And then also calculate the efficiency of each worker. Will respond to this fair comment." There was nothing, because Chuck really strove to introduce everyone to useful labor. Even the yard merchant had to work off his modest ration of food. Chickens don't dry. The master also reproached them when they refused to fulfill his plan. "Why are you clucking? You have 8 chickens, but only 5. Why am I feeding you?" Kelly, Corvers. The daughter was used to her father's antics. But her husband didn't want to accept his father-in-law's rules. For the first few years after the wedding, they still came to Colorado. On vacations, but they never got a chance to relax. The daughter was very resentful of her father, and one day she told him so. "Daddy, we're not slaves on a plantation to work your acres from morning till night. We are. We just want to lie in the sun, go to the river. After all, a vacation is given to a person to be able to fully rest." Chuck's such wishes put in a dead end. "So I'm offering you the best kind of vacation. Nothing strengthens the body like work. You're used to bumming around in your own town. That's why you look as pale as mushrooms." My daughter and son-in-law didn't voice their discontent anymore, but after 2 wasted vacations, they stopped coming to the village for the summer. Chuck held a grudge against them. He did not find fault in what had happened. The man believed that everything is to blame for the wrong upbringing. Asking children and raised some kind of flawed creatures, and it is understandable why this happened. To their every wish they wrote on your head, and now we're getting the fruits. Yesterday after her call, the elder Corver also grumbled for 2 hours, but Clara didn't give in to his provocation, and the scandal didn't take place. And today she got up with the rooster to get ready for the arrival of guests as a hostess with experience. She didn't want to make a nuisance of herself. The day before, she cleaned the house and done the laundry. All that was left was to put the clean clothes to sleep. Trying not to make noise, the woman headed for the exit, but one catch treacherously fastened under her feet. Immediately, her husband's voice rang out. "Clara, where did you pour us out so early?" Although there was no one in the house except her husband and the cat Jack, the mistress replied in a whisper, "I'm going to the river. I have to sleep curtains and bedspread. I still washed everything yesterday." The man unhappily interrupted, "And hunting you to beat your legs when the column in the yard." The woman did not enter into an argument with her husband and only promised me not long. "And you sleep, I'll be back. Then I'll make breakfast." Instead of answering, heard a long sigh, meaning that Chuck is extremely dissatisfied with the behavior of his wife. But for 10 years of marriage, Clara had learned to ignore, as they said in the village, her husband's little holes. She was afraid in galoshes not to wet her feet and picked up a basin with Pasternak's underwear. Clara walked leisurely towards the river, which was no more than a 3-minute walk away. But she heard women's voices in the distance and grinned wryly, thinking I was the only one who was so bad. Turns out I'm kind of crazier than I am. I wonder who can't sleep. The woman listened, and after a few seconds, she concluded, "I think it's Wendy who's dashing." "Well, now hold on. Will those two beasts get anyone?" There was nowhere to go, and the woman began to carefully descend the steep cliff, with wild bushes. The closer she got to the morning gathering of Maria's chief gossipers, the more clearly their dialogue could be heard. Wendy divorced her elderly interlocutor, Maria, confess. "When you were young, there was such a thing that a man ran away from his woman at night. And there was such a thing. Some men were so lustful to the female sex that they managed to offend more than one hut, and all about nutrition. We ate everything homemade and without chemicals. That's why we didn't get sick. And if there was a simple case of stomach problems, we drowned the mummy. I still always have this remedy in the house." Wendy chuckled nastily. "That's probably why you've been living longer than you should. And you've become like a mummy yourself." It was the fanatical love for the miraculous natural product was the reason that Maria in the village began to be called a mummy. The nickname was very apt, as the old woman had a clear outward resemblance. No one in Maria knew how old the old woman was, and she herself had completely forgotten her date of birth. But memory lapses and some other age-related peculiarities did not prevent Maria from always being aware of events. It was she who was the main spreader of rumors in the village. True, this transmission often resembled a game of spoiled telephone, and as it spreads, local news grows with non-existent details. To avoid becoming the subject of discussion, gossip girl Clara ducked into the bushes. She thought, "I'd better get away from the women, or they'll make up stories about me. Then you'll have to prove to people that you're not a camel." The woman carefully avoided the goods, who also came to the river with goats. "I'll go. There is a convenient place where the water is like crystal." Cautiously, the woman began to wade along the shore. She almost reached the old willow tree. How suddenly from above! Where did the country road run? A noise was heard, cars coming. Clara squatted down in the bushes. The thought flashed through her mind, who else had come here? From the ambush, she could see first a woman and then a man get out of the car. The woman had a shoebox in her hands, the kind of packaging the village store once sold imported women's boots in. So the first thing Corver thought of was that these strangers wanted to throw garbage into the river. She already wanted to tell them everything, but she heard the man irritatedly told his companion, "Go to the car. There is nothing to make light of here." The stranger objected, "There's not a living soul here." "What are you afraid of? It seems to you that there is no one here." "I grew up in the countryside, and I know that in such nice places everyone has eyes and ears." The man nodded toward the bushes that hid Clara. "I do not rule out that over there, for example, lurked one of the lovers of sensation." Secret watchers felt rivulets of sweat running down her back. She felt uncomfortable, but realized she could not give away her presence. The man held out his hands toward the box. "Give it to me, I'll do it myself." The woman handed him the box and headed for the car. The man went down to the bank, but did not stop at the water's edge, but went almost to the middle of the stream, where the current was more rapid. He lowered the box into the water with the words, "Well, that's it." No one will disturb us anymore." These words by the stranger were spoken in such a tone that Clara became uneasy. She sensed that the two men were up to something evil. Barely waiting for the man to go upstairs to the abandoned car, the village sleuths rushed to the shore, but the river current had already picked up their unexpected trophy and carried it down. Corver. She forgot about her daughter's arrival and the laundry left in the basin. She was running knee-deep in water trying to catch the howling box. Wendy watched and stunned. When they saw the running request that it might be with her a rabid fox bit, the unfortunate Maria shook her head disapprovingly. Then she would not have gone into the water. "There's something else going on here. You, Wendy, younger than me, are supposed to help." Wendy mumbled, "Why should I go if she won't?" But the mummy pushed, "Smoke and go. Not just in an hour, the broad will stumble and sink, and will be to blame for her death." Wendy rushed across the stream. "Aunt Clara, what's wrong?" Corver was almost out of breath, and a box screeched a little audibly. "Wendy, catch the box." Corver dashingly understood the task and quickly caught the shoebox. But helped all, the nominated package slips out of his hands, so had to press this load to his chest, and at this very moment a squeak was heard. It was so unexpected that Wendy almost dropped the box from her hands. She yelled all around, "Oh, ladies, I think there's someone in there. Hear that? It's making a voice. I'm scared, Maria from the shore. They must be monsters." They decided to get rid of the kittens. "Bring the box over here. Let's see who's hiding in there." Wendy and Clara waded ashore. All three rushed to the mysterious find on their license. The older box was opened by Maria. The old lady couldn't help but be overwhelmed with emotion. Oh, and the fathers. There are also children. The baby looked at the women with eyes as clear as the summer sky. For several minutes, the women were silent, unable to believe what had really happened. Finally, Wendy said they should take him to the warmth. Clara supported the idea. "Let's go to my place. My house is closer. I think the first thing we should do is report it to the proper authorities. I saw the men who did it, a man with such cheerful stubble and a woman with him. I didn't get a good look at them, but I recognized their voices." Maria added if the girl was young. She was definitely a cuckoo mom. There's a lot of them today, wandering around and then dropping off babies. Wendy argued if they had. Were they trying to kill the baby or the little girl? Chuck was amazed when he saw a procession of women led by his wife out the window. He jumped out of Clara's house. "Is something wrong?" "Something's wrong." Peter went to rinse the laundry. She went to the woman's house and began to tell him about the morning's adventure. Interrupting each other, Chuck only shook his head. "How many years have I lived in the world? This is the first time I've encountered such a thing. But the women are not amateurish. We'll have to report it to the proper authorities." The man pulled on his cap and saddled his bike. No sooner had the August sun reached the horizon than the news of the strange find spread all over the world. The true old-timers of the village clutched at their hearts. What a horror! What kind of a wicked day should one be to let one's own child go down the river? It was this version became the main in the criminal case, which was opened after the inspection. The investigators who arrived at the scene of the incident, the absent-minded mother, searched the whole neighborhood, but the search did not yield any results. The found girl was sent to the district hospital, and the fate of the little girl for many years remained unknown to the women who found her. The story began to be gradually forgotten when new circumstances were suddenly revealed. Nancy was preparing breakfast when her husband's displeased shout came from the bedroom. "Where's my shirt?" In addition to irritation in the man's voice, slipped, anger, discontent, and a whole bunch of other negative emotions. The woman whispered, "He got off on the wrong foot again." But aloud she quite peacefully advised, "Darling, take a closer look at all your shirts in the closet." His wife's answer did not satisfy Martin and ideas. "Show me, you see, I'm busy." "Wait a minute." Outraged sighs came from the bedroom. Then they were replaced by loud thumps on the platinum closet door. Nancy sensed by her skin that another scandal was brewing, so she hurried to the hot. "Martin, are you making every little thing an excuse for a scolding?" The woman opened the closet. "Here are all your shirts. Rose your western eyes and everything will be fine." Man, you poked your wife's chest with your index finger. You're the one with the eyes. I need a pale blue striped shirt. I don't see it here. Nancy blushed and stammered and began to make excuses. I'm sorry, I didn't have time to wash it yesterday, but you could have chosen something else. You have a whole collection of shirts. Martin looked down at his wife. I need the one with the stripes. I have an important meeting today. A blue shirt is the most appropriate for the event. Martin looked at his wife again with a piercing gaze and asked with a sneer, wondering what you were so busy with that you didn't have time to fulfill your direct duties? The woman took her eyes away and began to rub her apron with excitement. Adriana had a report concert in music yesterday, so I didn't have time. The man clutched his head. Every day it's the same thing. Adriana is our girl, incredibly talented. I don't mind. People admire song and dance, but not to the detriment of the family. Nancy quietly objected to Martin. What damage are you talking about? Doesn't our daughter seem to be making progress? The man interrupted impatiently, not generalizing. I've already told you that I have no feelings for that girl. Martin, please be quiet. Adriana might hear. Let her hear. And I'm not going to keep quiet anymore. I'm sick to my stomach and clicky. It was your idea, and I've regretted giving in to you 100 times over, no matter what you do to me. But I can't take someone else's baby as my own. Nancy folded her arms across her chest. Martin, I'm begging you, don't yell. You can't do this. That's right, we can't live like this anymore. I've told you many times to get rid of your illusions, but you're stubborn. What about merging? God didn't give us children of our own. You could have accepted it. That's what smart people do. And you've got the urge to do something. You want to make someone happy, and the result is nothing but trouble. The woman tried to get a word in her defense. Martin, what kind of trouble are you talking about? That poor child is giving you trouble. Do you still ask? Of course you can't understand my resentment because you're only preoccupied with her. You don't give a damn about me. You didn't even deign to wash my favorite shirt on time. Martin held himself back and sprinkled his wife's head with reproaches. The woman flinched at every word and constantly looked back at the door. She still hoped Adriana couldn't hear anything. But the 12-year-old girl was crying silently, leaning against the doorway in her room. She swallowed the bitter tears and whispered, "Still, I'll run away. I'll be patient a little longer, and then I'll run away." Adriana first began to think about running away 2 years ago when she found out she was adopted. The discovery hurt her childish heart. But she had to be patient, because hasty actions could lead to undesirable consequences. Adriana realized that in case of an unsuccessful escape, an orphanage awaited her. She did not want to get into such institutions. Therefore, all these years she had to pretend that she knew nothing about the real situation. The foster parents, the girls also pretended that everything was fine in the family. Nancy especially tried. For 12 years, this kind woman tried her best to keep the family together. Nancy and Martin had been friends since they were students. At first, their relationship was more like a mutually beneficial partnership. The girl wrote essays for the guy, and he willingly played the role of her personal bodyguard. In this format flew all 5 years of study, and before receiving a diploma, both realized that they do not want to part. Martin was the first to bring it up. Listen, Nancy, you and I have already been through it. Personally, I'm depressed about the separation. How would you like to stay with me? Although the girl expected from her friend quite different words. She replied, I certainly don't mind. But what kind of relationship format do you have in mind? Nancy knew that Martin was against old-fashioned conventions. Many times the guy declared that he was in favor of free love, but before his words seemed to be a usual bravado, and the girl didn't pay much attention to them. That's why she took Martin's proposal with understandable wariness. But he also answered her direct question honestly. Nancy, I respect you very much, and therefore I will not deceive you. Yes, I don't want to run to the registry office, but you won't agree to cohabitation. It was both a question and a statement. After a short pause, Nancy replied, No, I wouldn't. I'm sorry, but I was raised conservative. But I'm not the only girl on the planet. You have plenty of admirers, and someone is bound to say yes. The conversation was taking an unpleasant turn, and the girl wanted to leave, but Martin grabbed her arm. "Nancy, don't be so hot. You didn't even let me finish my thought. Anyway, I don't want any other girl. For your sake, I'm ready to change my principles." The boy suddenly blushed and stammered. "You marry me from then on. Everything will be as it should be with the wedding and guests." This crumpled and explanation to the depths of the soul touched the girl, and she gave her consent. Although in Philistine circles, such marriages are considered unstable. Psychologists have a different opinion on this matter. They consider a pragmatic approach is a more reliable guarantor for the preservation of marital bonds than romantic sense of respect for the interests of the partner was the fertile ground on which soon blossomed love. Martin. To his friend, he endeavored to forestall every desire of his young wife, and Nancy reciprocated him. Therefore, the first 5 years of matrimony were the happiest period of their lives. But both were very anxious to become parents. With this question, there were insurmountable difficulties. Doctors found in Nancy some pathology, interfering with her getting pregnant. For several years, the woman was intensively treated, went to expensive resorts, but the matter did not move from the dead point. Then a doctor working with the couple advised not to get yourself wound up for nothing. You have 2 choices. Find a woman who will bear a child for you or take the baby. Nancy didn't immediately realize what the doctor was suggesting and retorted, "Well, if I can't have babies, then the baby won't be ours either. That's not quite right. It will be half yours since your husband has no reproductive problems." Martin saw his wife turn pale. He acted like a devoted and loving husband. No, that's not an option for us. We want a level playing field on this issue. So we will consider the second proposal. Nancy then appreciated her husband's noble act. "Thank you, Martin. You are the best man in the world." The following weeks and months flew by in anticipation. The couple immediately announced their desire to take a baby under a year old who would have no connection to the biological parents. During the waiting period, Martin had cooled down a bit and mentally berated himself for his rash move. He secretly hoped that the search process would yield nothing, but one day they got a call. "Come to our shelter. A beautiful baby girl has been brought in. No parents could be found, so the girl's background is completely clean. And another big plus, no abnormalities in terms of physical and mental development." Nancy was in 7th heaven from the unexpected happiness. Therefore, Martin could not deny her one more small pleasure. After all, he was used to fulfill her wishes, and thought that the appearance of a little girl would not change his comfortable lifestyle. Indeed, for the first 2 years, it was even interesting for a man to feel like a father. But then more and more, often the brain began to sharpen the thought you could have your own child and grow a foundling. "Tell me, why do you need it?" This question he asked himself every time. He noticed that his wife gives all the time to his adopted daughter. When she began to make claims against her, she would laughingly reply, "Martin, well, you are a grown-up uncle. Aren't you ashamed to compete with a little girl?" He was not ashamed at all, because he thought he had more right to the attention of the woman he loved than a foundling taken from the orphanage. Nancy tried in every possible way to fight her husband's jealousy, but neither persuasion nor appeals to conscience worked on him. The first scandal broke out when Adriana fell ill with angina. The girl had a fever, and Nancy stayed with her for 2 days. In the morning, Martin went into the kitchen and found the pots empty. Anger clouded his judgment, and he burst into the nursery, where his wife was fasting at the sick child's bedside. "Nancy, do you think this is normal?" The woman stared at him, uncomprehending. "Martin, there's no need to scream. The baby's only just fallen asleep. She was feverish all night." He mockingly teased the woman, too. "The baby just fell asleep. I woke up an hour ago. Thought I'd get breakfast, but the kitchen was a mess. Martin, you can see I can't. How hard is it for you to make yourself an omelet?" That first time he gave in to his wife, and then even apologized for his unworthy behavior. But it was then that he finally lost the desire to be a father to someone else's girl. Martin began to avoid joint walks. If Adriana asked him to play with her, he would rough her up with food. "You're a big girl, play by yourself." When Adriana went to kindergarten, Martin only as a last resort agreed to pick her up. At school, the same story repeated itself. One day, the teacher couldn't stand it and told Nancy Nikolaevna everything. "It's a strange family you have. It seems that your father lives his own separate life." Nancy was afraid to tell the truth and gave a whole vegetable garden of tall tales, trying to convince the teacher that everything was all right. "My husband is a very busy man. He has a demanding job, so he can't give his daughter much attention." The teacher was puzzled again. But in such situations, children usually make up the most incredible stories about their dads, and your Adriana is acting as if she has no father at all. Nancy had nothing to say, and she hurried to end the unpleasant conversation with the teacher. "I'm sorry, Adriana, and I don't have time. She's in music school." And about the story about father's deeds, I can say from my own experience that not all children are ready to talk about what is going on at home. Our Adriana is a very secretive girl, so she doesn't like to expose her feelings. Nancy saw the teacher look at her in bewilderment. At that moment, she wanted to fall under the ground in shame. But she found nothing better to do than rebuke her daughter. "Adriana, you have a wonderful father. You can be proud of him." The girl lowered her head and muttered under her nose, "He's alien, like in an alien movie." Nancy grimaced. "Adriana, what the hell are you talking about? Are you having some kind of sick fantasy?" The girl didn't answer anything, but after that incident, she finally withdrew and spent most of her time in her room. Adriana loved her foster mom very much and didn't want to be the cause of her troubles. For this reason alone, she tried not to bother Martin's eyes, so that he would not play the son to his wife. When another dispute broke out between the parents, the girl persuaded herself to be patient. "Adriana, there is only a little bit left. After 9 grades, you can go to college." True, this option was possible only when achieving certain success in music school. And Adriana tried her best. She participated in various competitions. And at school, not a single concert was without her. But time dragged very slowly, and one day the nagging of her foster father became unbearable. After the contest of young talents, which was held in the regional center, in the group of participants missing one contestant. Everyone had seen Adriana just a minute ago, but could not say where she was. The group leader was hysterical. What's going to happen now? What am I going to tell Adriana's parents? I'm going to get fired from my job for this. The average guess was 100% correct. The day after the young violinist went missing, the teachers asked her to write a letter of resignation. Adriana was searched for in the regional capital and nearby towns and villages. The best operatives were involved in the search, but the girl was never found. Of course, Nancy was the most worried. The woman could not forgive herself for not going to the contest with Adriana. She guessed that the daring girl ran away because of the unhealthy situation in the family. In secret from her husband, the unhappy mother decided to use the services of a private investigator, especially in the list of her acquaintances was such a specialist. The only person who was happy about the girl's disappearance was her adoptive father. Martin felt on top of his game again, and like an incantation mentally repeated, "Just don't find the girl. Lord, make it so that she would not be found." His heart was pounding frantically in his chest with excitement. Nancy nestled against the fancy glass of the carriage window, trying to see her sister among the people meeting her. But the dirt so thickly covered the once transparent surface that only silhouettes could be seen. The conductor stepped past twice. During the third passage through the parlor car, she lingered near the strange passenger. "Citizen, you're trying in vain. Even in vain. What man can't see what is going on the other side of the camera?" The conductor laughed a good joke, and Nancy shuddered. Her nerves felt as if 2 words, citizen and camera, had been pulled with a whip. Memory instantly responded to these verbal cues. Imagination immediately presented images from the recent past. That, and of a young woman. With a tremendous effort of will, Nancy caught up with the terrible visions and smiled strainedly. Indeed, in your carriage you can safely organize quests. It's quite an appropriate environment. The conductor happily splashed her hands together. "Oh, that's an idea. We need to offer the bosses a creative way to get additional profit." Joy was quickly replaced by sadness. And the woman with a despairing sigh added how many years they have been promising to write off this old stuff. But it's still there. "I used to love my job so much. but now it's like hard labor. Nancy felt another jolt to her strained nerves. God, she thought, how many years am I going to shudder at the mention of such words? The conductor noticed the pale face of the passenger who had been sitting by the window all 3 nights of the journey. The woman seemed strange to her at once, but it was considered a gross violation of the rules to pester passengers. The flight was coming to its logical conclusion, and the conductor was anxious to get home. She looked at Nancy once more carefully. You'd better hurry up, because I've got a lot to do. You're the last one left in the vestibule. Nancy was embarrassed again and grabbed her bag. Yeah, I'm on my way. My sister is supposed to meet me. The conductor with annoyance thought I care. Who's meeting you? She's a weird lady, and she's dressed out of style, and her luggage is suspiciously sparse. Suddenly, the clerk had an epiphany. The girls must be from out of town. I should have known better. Something began to fail me. My experienced eye is not good. The owner of the long-distance train car argued with herself for a long time about the nuances of hard work. But Nancy Evans had no idea that it was she who had provoked the activation of the uniformed woman's mental activity. There was heavy two-way traffic on the platform, and Nancy stood for a long time in the middle of this lively stream. Suddenly, the voice of Vanessa Nancy sounded from behind. Why on earth are you standing like a stiff? The sisters hugged each other for a long time and expressed their emotions loudly. When the excitement of the meeting had died down a little, Vanessa confidently took her under her arm. I'm in the car. Let's go to the parking lot. We'll have time to talk. Nancy nodded her head in agreement and obediently followed her sister. She admired Faith, who was groomed from the tips of her nails to her hair. She held herself very confidently, and it finally confused her younger sister. Vanessa had always been cloistered and quiet, afraid to say a word, and here I just didn't recognize her a few times my sister looked back to make sure Nancy was keeping up. Before getting into the car, Vanessa asked in surprise, nodding as she walked to her travel bag. And that's all your luggage? Nancy blushed and mumbled something inaudible. The older sister remarked bitterly nothing. Rags are a matter of time. The main thing is health. If your arms and legs are in place and your head is all right, then no hardship is too great. My hubby is in the throes of extracting dough to then flush the process all at once. Often reminds me of a salt shaker in a latrine. It's quick, but not always efficient. Vanessa opened the car door, and Nancy saw a man with the same lonely beard. I'd like you to meet my sister. This is my treasure. Ethan Simmons is my second lawful husband and passionate. A satisfied smile appeared on Ethan's face without taking your gaze off the laptop monitor. Vanessa, you're too much to handle. You have me in a concrete vise. Nancy could hardly contain her laughter. She was struck not so much by the appearance of her husband, her sister, as by the tone of the man's voice. It was a soft female soprano. Ethan didn't even look at his relative, but unmistakably guessed her mood. Nancy, don't be surprised at anything. You're going to have to deal with a lot of weirdness, but I want to reassure you. I'm fine in every aspect of my life, and my voice is unique. However, it doesn't interfere with my life at all. Really my gold. Ethan kissed her cheek, and Vanessa kissed her husband with a ringing kiss. Move over. Occupying the entire salon. Her sister's husband instantly shrank back and crawled away to a corner. Nancy timidly sat down next to him. Ethan immediately tried to intrigue his spouse's relative Nancy. If you dream of getting rich, come to me, I'll teach you how to forecast. And Vanessa heard everything and threatened her husband with her fist. I'll teach you. Don't you dare spoil my sister. She'd had enough of that already. Ethan was quiet, but he looked at Nancy with an expressive look. She pretended not to understand. Unhappy thoughts had taken over her mind again. She could not dismiss them. Nancy's whole life lay ahead of her. She wanted very much not to make any more fatal mistakes. The rest of the way to the house where her lover's spouse had made their family nest. Nancy thought about future prospects, but all thoughts were reduced to one alone. That is, without outside help, she was unlikely to be able to bring her fate to an even straight line. Her older sister, as if reading her thoughts from a distance, said confidently, not barefoot Nancy, "Everything will be fine. After all, you are not alone in this world, can fully count on us. Beloved, you occupied an apartment on the third floor of a new building. It was a real apartment with a second tier opening onto a balcony. Nancy was not well versed in the subtleties of modern architecture, so she was struck by the extraordinary organization of space. After looking at the apartment, she said to Vanessa with admiration, "I have no words. You can only see such luxury in the movies." Her older sister grinned. "You haven't seen real luxury. This is a nice apartment. We got it in such a shabby state that we don't want to remember it. My husband was in a trance when he first got here. I saw the opportunity right away, and as you can see, I was right. Honestly, I'm proud of this cozy apartment. It's my favorite thing about it. Feel free to come in and stay with us until you get bored. Come on, I'll show you your room." Vanessa led her sister behind her and stopped at the very end of the long corridor. It used to be a closet, but now it's a decent room for a young woman. "Can you take a shower and get to the table? I'll give you half an hour." Vanessa left. Nancy cautiously crouched down on the edge of the shaft U. It was already as soft and pleasant to sit on as it had been over the years. I'd forgotten what a real bed looked like. The tears didn't come up. Her eyes and Nancy had to make an effort on herself to regain her composure. She whispered encouragement to herself not to drift. "Hopefully everything will be okay." "I'm going to take a shower," Sis advised. The sudsy jets of water hit her body, putting on memories of a very different life. She naively believed that that happiness was given to her on. But it turned out that the artificially created world can shatter in an instant into small shards. That's how China shatters, if you accidentally let it out of your hands. Nancy was younger than her sister by as much as 8 years. As a child, this difference had seemed enormous, and little Nancy looked upon Faith as an adult. The older sister was diligent in her duties and taught the younger one about life. Nancy never swung for unattainable goals, counting on her spleen. "Then you'll be out of trouble. Remember, it's better to move slowly but surely than to run, stumbling and falling." At her young age, Nancy understood little of her older sister's lengthy speech. But Vanessa could speak beautifully, and that fascinated the girl. In 5th grade, she decided for herself to be like Vanessa. She's good at everything. What business won't she take on? She wanted to go to university, and she did. Nancy tried very hard to reach the level of her older sister, and if possible, to go a little higher. But this goal could only be achieved with complete determination, and there were so many interesting things around. In a word, Nancy tolerated, and then spit on all the previously accepted attitudes. "I will live with my own head. Vanessa is smart, but no one will marry her. And I want to find a guy who'll give me everything at once. Why go to all this trouble?" And Nancy didn't waste her energy. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the Mechanical Engineering Institute because there was a shortage of applicants. But after a year, she dropped out. Her older sister found out about this deed only 6 months later. She didn't choose her words, scolding Nancy. "What do you think with your head or any other place? Today you can't go anywhere without a crust." Nancy objected many girls she knew had settled down quite well. For example, Maria was struggling from 2 to 3 at school, but she met a guy who had everything, and now she was rolling around like a cheese in butter. And Molly from the parallel class won the City Beauty Contest, and now works as a model. Vanessa tried to prove to the naive fool that such happy stories usually end badly, and rich husbands leave their uneducated wives. And the professional activity of modeling is limited by age. Nancy didn't want to listen to her big sister. "Vanessa, I'm sick of you telling me what to do. And in fact, I think you are saying all this on purpose because you are jealous of me." The sister asked in surprise, "What is there to be jealous of? What about my youth and beauty? You'll be 26 soon, and you haven't gotten married. Is that an achievement, getting married?" Of course it is. Although Vanessa was very upset with her, she tried not to show her feelings. Her older sister made a few more attempts to change Nancy's mind, but then she waved goodbye. "Live your life as you wish. Just don't blame anyone for your failures later." But then, at 18, Nancy desperately believed in her luck for her great goal. She befriended the very same Molly who often shone her smile from the pages of fashion magazines. The former high school buddy pushed Nancy through the casting call, and she was noticed. First, luck screamed and Nancy worked herself to the hilt for the camera. But she wasn't as lucky as Molly and had to star in cheap commercials, baby shampoos, and hygiene products. When she got tired of such humiliating work, she decided to protest. But what she heard back was, "You should be thankful you're getting such a lowly job. Girl, look at yourself in the mirror and you'll realize it. You've got an attractive face, but the rest of it, that's why she's making do with what she's got." It was a real bummer. It left Nancy in a prolonged state of despondency. She even had all sorts of bad thoughts. It is not known how her fate would have turned out in the future, if not for a chance meeting with Benjamin. That evening, she was just strolling through the city. Her mind, like her pockets, was empty. Nancy wondered where else she could go to earn a living. Suddenly, a luxury sports car stopped nearby, from which a man of about 35 years old jumped out. Apparently, he did not expect to meet on his way obstacles in the form of money. The girl also did not expect someone to jump on her and fell on all fours right into a puddle. The perpetrator of the accident began to apologize. "Young lady, believe me, I didn't mean to inconvenience you. Everything came out by accident." Nancy struggled to get up and was horrified to see her torn tights and shattered knee. Her eyes darkened with anger. "Did you accidentally walk out? Are you apologizing? I'm neither hot nor cold for your apology. These tights cost me half my paycheck, and now I have a broken knee. I can't walk normally." At the first serious accusation, the man started apologizing again. "Girl, honey, it's all fixable. Of course, except for the broken knee, I'll try to fix it. I'll make it up to you. Get in the car." He opened the door of the sports car, but Nancy shook his head. "And what's that? I'm not going anywhere with you. How do I know what's on your mind?" The man got out of the car again. "I hear you. You're doing the right thing. It never hurts to be extra vigilant." Nancy tried to get her closet into a less decent shape, but the dirty water had managed to disappear halfway down her coat, white in color. Her skirt and boots were also slathered in mud. The culprit of her fall for some reason stepped back 5 meters and concluded, "Yes, it's not a very pleasant picture. It seems that you, excuse me, lead an antisocial life." The insolence of the stranger made the girl mad, and she again switched to a familiar form of communication. "Listen, dude, you still have the conscience to joke. And if I called you now and in the mud, how would you look at it?" The young man, just in case, paid back and put his hands forward. "Girl, sweetheart, let's not go to extremes. We'll go with you now somewhere that sells clothes and you pick out anything you like." Hearing the code words, "anything you like," Nancy softened her tone a little. "Okay, I'll do it. There's a boutique nearby where you can buy everything, despite your not quite presentable appearance." Nancy confidently headed towards the store of branded clothes. The guard was reluctant to let her in at first, but after looking at her companion, he politely opened the door. "Welcome, Mr. Evans," Nancy asked in surprise. "Do they know you here?" The man answered nothing and led her to a row of clothes. "Choose anything you like." The girl fought for a long time with the desire to take away more, hanging with fashionable clothes. But the inner voice warned her against rash actions, and she took only a skirt, a reinforced jacket, and a pair of tights. As an example, the victim paid for new clothes. Only pantyhose she did not dare to put on, because the wound on her knees continued to bleed. The saleswoman came to the rescue. She handed her some tissues and bandages treated in leg. Nancy made herself a bandage and only then took out of the beautifully packaged brake tights, which was the main fashion trend. She fidgeted in front of the mirror for a long time, admiring her reflection, while only one thought swirled annoyingly in her head. This is probably how a fairy tale begins. I would give anything in the world that it never ends. Her experience in advertising came in handy, and she effectively walked out of the examples. The one whose fault the girl had to bathe in a puddle looked at her with undisguised admiration. After a moment's confusion, he pronounced the miraculous transformation of the ugly duckling into a queen. At this point, we should have started the fanfare. But for lack of musical accompaniment, I will, with your permission, play something suitable myself." The man began to imitate various musical instruments, and the staff of the store gave Art, the new improviser, with applause. Nancy did not see the amount her companion paid at the cash register. At that moment, her greatest concern was whether there would be a continuation of this miserable celebration. They left the store together, and a man right on the platform at the entrance extended his hand to her. Benjamin Evans, Nancy. The touch of the strong man's hand caused a storm of emotion in the girl's soul. After all, this was not a yellow mouth and her no, but a fully established man. Nancy had no experience with such people and was very much afraid of appearing primitive or ignorant. She had forgotten how she had scolded this man only an hour ago, and now she really wanted to please him. Benjamin watched her silently for a few minutes, but he was thinking about something of his own. Then he made a sudden suggestion. "I don't think this evening would be complete without a cozy place for you and me. Tell me, what's your favorite?" Did Nancy say ice cream and orange juice? That's great. So we're going to go to a cafe that serves your favorite treats. They sat at a table opposite each other, and Benjamin kept looking at her. For the first few minutes, Nancy felt a little stiff, but after a glass of champagne, the awkwardness disappeared. It seemed to her that she had known Benjamin for 1,000 years. The next day they met again, and just 2 months later they became husband and wife. On their wedding day, Nancy finally believed in a fairy tale. But she had forgotten then that fairy tales are bound to have negative characters in addition to good ones. Evans's country house, where the newlyweds settled, lived still widowed Mother Benjamin and his half-sister Lucy, with whom she from the first day did not develop a relationship. But the real personification of evil and perfidy was her husband's friend and companion. Kevin, the happy and very much in love young woman, did not know then that her happiness would last only 2 years, 3 months and 7 days. "Nancy, you didn't fall asleep in there." Her sister's voice brought Nancy out of her trance state. She answered cheerfully, trying to shout over the sound of the water. "I didn't fall asleep, but I almost passed out. Didn't even think it was possible to be happy about such simple things as a soft bed, a warm shower. I'll be right back. Hurry up. Your nephew's getting impatient. He's dying to meet his own aunt." Nancy threw on a wet-bodied terrycloth robe, which was hanging on the rack in the bathroom. "I too, when I drove all the way here, I thought about how I would meet you and your son. I imagined different pictures, but in life everything rarely works out according to a preconceived plan." Vanessa was thinking about something of her own, and her little sister touched her shoulder lightly. "Lucky, wake up. You just scolded me, and suddenly you're on the fritz. Is something bothering you?" Ira nodded and begged. She looked at her sister again. "There is one point on you only do not take offense, but you yourself understand that there is no need for a shot. And Ethan to know the details of your life." Something very heavy came over her shoulders. She looked her sister in the eye for a long time. "Is that what you care about? You don't have to worry. I won't talk about my life. I'll keep quiet. Vanessa, I can have dinner somewhere else. Don't worry, I have some money, and I'm not burdened by my presence." Vanessa's face flushed with shame, and she began to justify herself. "Nancy, why are you overreacting? I didn't say anything that's not inappropriate. I just asked Vanessa, and I'm asking you not to either. I understand. If I were you, I'd probably be worried that word of Bunny's ex moving into my house would spread all over town." "Nancy, that's not what I meant. Robert's only 7 years old, and he doesn't understand a lot of things. And I'm not going to bring your son into my business. I'm just a temporary guest. I won't be here tomorrow. I promise. Nancy, why would you do that? I prepared a celebratory dinner in honor of your arrival. Ethan can't wait. He's prepared a toast. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It just came out of nowhere." Vanessa's eyes glittered suspiciously, and Nancy was tied in a tight knot. Her own pride walked down with her sister to the dining room. The evening passed homeward, warm and cheerful. Robert immediately found common ground and spilled all his secrets to her. Ethan made toasts, and at the end of the evening meal could barely move his tongue. Vanessa, with a practiced movement, threw his limp body on her back and said affectionately, "Let's go to bed." Is that how you outdid yourself tonight? At least a little distraction. The woman took her husband to the bedroom and soon returned. Don't worry, he's a good guy. It's just that his addiction is killing him. I checked him into rehab, but he ran away. They fished him out of the countryside 2 weeks later. Nancy, you wouldn't believe the time they were looking for my Solomon. I changed my mind. I'm surprised I survived, Nancy said quietly. Why don't you believe me? I believe you. I, too, have to find the person I love the most. Vanessa stared at her sister for a long moment. Nancy, maybe you shouldn't. Think about it. It's better to start over. You're still very young, and you've got everything ahead of you. I can't start a new life without my daughter. All these years in the colony and then in the settlement, I've been thinking about my little girl. She is my ray of hope in this unsightly darkness, which for some reason is called life. Vanessa looked away and nervously tugged at the edges of her sweater. If I understand you correctly, you're going to visit Evans. Just like that, Vanessa moved closer to her sister. Nancy, I didn't want to tell you before, but the thing is, they don't have your daughter. Nancy screamed, "What are you talking about? Where is she? Could she be?" She disappeared right after they arrested you. The next night or 24 hours later, but the baby's missing. She was snatched right out of the house. Grandma, Benjamin's mom, went to the kitchen to get formula. When she came back, the baby wasn't in the crib. There was a commotion and the police and dogs came. But they never found the girl. Vanessa, why didn't you tell me before? You knew and you didn't say anything. Why was I afraid it would break you completely? Nancy collapsed onto the back of the couch, her shoulders and back shuddering. Her sister realized she was sobbing without a man. Vanessa began stroking her, trying to soothe her. Nancy, get over it. Accept that fact. There's nothing you can do about it anyway. I can't ever accept it. Vanessa, it's so unfair. I've waited so many years for this day. This is the only Nancy I've lived for. I agree with you. It's not fair. Everything that happened to you 12 years ago is unfair. I don't believe then or now that your husband's death was your fault. But it's been years. You can't change anything now. Much to my regret. Nancy listened to her sister and nodded affirmatively. Yes, you're saying all the right things, but I don't want to accept it. I want to find my daughter, and I will find her. Even if I have to walk around the globe or go to the North Pole for that. I'm not afraid of any hardship. Vanessa, I have lived all these years with this idea that I have a daughter. I understand you perfectly well. But where will you look for her after all these years? The specialists couldn't do it then. What can you do? I'm a mother. I can do anything. My heart will definitely tell me the right decision. After the heart-to-heart talk, the sisters went to their rooms, but both of them did not close their eyes during the night. Early in the morning, Vanessa looked into the room where the sisters settled, and almost stunned Nancy stood at the threshold, stands skinny, traveling with a bag. Where did you pour that out for us? The guests grinned crookily. Thank you for the shelter, but I'll be going. I don't want to be a burden to you. Vanessa brought the passageway with her. I'm not letting you go anywhere. You know, I was up all night. I kept thinking, what can we do for you? And then this morning, I remembered Sam. He's a friend of my Ethan's. They used to box or run together. Nancy smiled. Probably running. Vanessa nodded understandingly. Yeah, my pimple's a lousy fighter, but his head works. You wouldn't believe it, but he's developed his own system and often wins. Sometimes it's a pretty decent amount of money. It's his day job. Oh, I didn't tell you. We're a family business. We bought a little restaurant when we first got married, and it's all thanks to my Ethan. He's a lawyer by training and knows the ins and outs of the law. And his friend Jindin used to be an investigator. Then he went private investigator, so I thought I should ask him for help. Nancy stood in the middle of the room at a loss. Her sister looked at her, sighed, and said with a chuckle, Don't be in a hurry. There's always time to leave. All right, I'll stay. Thank you, Vanessa. I haven't done anything to thank me yet. You are, and that alone means a lot to me. It means a lot to me too. But it's appropriate to use a phrase from a popular cartoon. You and I are sisters of the same blood. and were destined to help each other. Nancy disappeared into her big sister's bosom and cried. She remembered how Vanessa had tried to instill in her, from a small age, the basics of life, how she had worried about her small failures and rejoiced at her successes. And then, when her mother died, Vanessa had cared for her as her own child. Her older sister had made many sacrifices for her. She was the one who supported her in every way possible during the hardest years, when Nancy was serving time for a crime she didn't commit. It was even frightening to think what would have happened to her if Vanessa had given up on her then. All of these thoughts were shyly in the young woman's mind. Vanessa was also at that moment thinking about how to restore her sister's will to live. "It's okay, Nancy, you and I will get through this. It's always easier together, and I'll never leave you." Sam considered himself a very successful man. He did not ask a lot from fate and used to be satisfied with what made his existence comfortable. He owned a small apartment and a car. He also had enough money for food and clothes. All this allowed Sam to lead a normal lifestyle, according to his concepts. Of course, in his youth he had completely different plans, but the first 3 years of work in the internal affairs showed that he was not adapted to act at the stroke of someone's wand. Realizing this, a young investigator of one of the district departments of the regional center decided to open his own business, although this idea was fraught with the risk of being left with nothing. Sam rushed into battle with an open fence. He rented a small basement for his office, launched advertising through social networks, and the business started. Ethan Simmons provided substantial help at first, and Sam felt it was his sacred duty to repay the Institute to his comrade in kind. Since Ethan was an avid gambler, he often got into tough messes, from which he had to pull him out. Many times, Sam tried to set Ethan straight. "Ethan, you're a grown man. It's time to come to your senses. You have a son growing up, and what kind of example are you setting for him?" Ethan, sighing heavily, usually answered in his unique voice, "I know it's bad, but it's a contagion. It's like an infection that gets into your brain and grinds it down every minute." Of course, Ethan couldn't be considered an avid gambler because at times he gave up this dirty business and went headlong into his restaurant business. But such periods were not long, and Ethan would fall back into his quarry. Yesterday, Simmons called him in the middle of the night, and his request was very puzzling. "Sam urgently needs your help. We need to find a man who disappeared without a trace 12 years ago." "Ethan, can't you wait till morning to make your call?" "I'm sorry, but I couldn't. I've got a lot on my plate, and you're the expert on mysterious disappearances." Indeed, in the first years of operational work, young investigator managed to solve 2 cases of many years ago. But quickly and unraveling mysterious disappearances was nothing surprising. Just Sam immediately saw what his senior colleagues missed. In other words, the soap eye effect, which is often found in the professional environment, worked in the investigation. The young operative did not suffer from this defect, so he quickly uncovered 2 records, did not leave them hanging. This event shocked the whole department, and they began to praise the guy at every turn. And others, on the contrary, scolded his viewer. Let nothing surprising. The kid wanted to serve before his superiors to get a star before the due date. To listen to such accusations was offensive, but to defend the honor of his good name did not allow strict adherence to the chain of command. That is why Sam tolerated unflattering comments of his colleagues. When he was promoted, detractors in general toughened and began to openly frame the guy in order not to become a victim of behind-the-scenes intrigue. After a short deliberation, wrote a report to the head of the district department. At first, he didn't want to let him go. He persuaded him to stay. "Sam, you're just at the beginning of your professional journey, so you're not good at everything yet. Believe me, as you gain experience, your perception of your profession will change. We've all been through this school." Brandon listened politely to his boss, but he didn't change his mind. Years later, he never regretted that he hadn't succumbed to his superiors' entreaties. Private investigation gave full freedom of action and was no less interesting than work in government agencies. Already in a year, Sam had his own clientele. Mostly, they were representatives of medium and small businesses, which were not given a quiet life. competitors often turned for professional help deceived wives and husbands. But usually these were cases of current days, which were disclosed on fresh traces. So the woman's request did not arouse optimism in the detective's soul, although he encouraged his friend. "All right, Ethan, I'll check in with you in the morning." He thought that he would probably have to drop the case. After all, I'm not the only one in the private search business. There are people who specialize in finding missing relatives. With these thoughts, Sam rang the doorbell of his beloved's apartment, waiting to be greeted with the hospitality required in such cases. The door was opened by the landlady and immediately rejected. "Sam, we are looking forward to it. Come in, please. Now we will tell you everything, so to speak, from the first hand." The man followed the woman into the living room and immediately froze in place. On the sofa sat a young woman whose appearance immediately struck him. She had delicate facial features and unusually sad eyes. Ethan's wife introduced the stranger. "This is Nancy, my own sister. She's the one with the missing daughter. Perhaps it would be best if Nancy told you herself." Sam stared into the woman's bottomless eyes and could not tear his gaze away. He had forgotten all about his intention to give up a job that could take up a lot of his time. After a long pause, the man said in a steady voice, "I would like to know everything in detail, when it happened and under what circumstances." The older sister realized at once that her presence might interfere with a frank conversation. "You two talk, but I'll go and put the kettle on." "I'll put the kettle on. Sam, Ethan should be here soon. He went to the bank this morning." The guest reassured the woman. "All right, I'll wait for him. In the meantime, we'll have a word with your sister." Vanessa said Nancy, or Nancy, as you prefer. "My sister and I are simple people and don't pretend to be on special terms. It's for the best. After all, an open conversation gives much more than a formal conversation." When Vanessa left the drawing room, the man turned to Nancy, although it is incredibly difficult. "But try to remember everything in great detail." She looked directly into his eyes. After a second of confusion, Nancy said with apparent defiance, "Unfortunately, the details are unknown to me because the little girl disappeared right after my husband died. That is, he didn't die himself, but was helped." A gambling light appeared in Rindon's eyes. "Is that what you think? Or has the investigation established it?" The certainty was instantly gone, and Nancy lowered her eyes. "Your colleagues blamed me immediately. I wasn't even allowed to dress and feed my daughter. She was only 2.5 months old. She screamed, but they wouldn't let me see her. They handcuffed me and dragged me to the car. It was terrifying. The memories caused the poor woman pain and suffering." Nancy tried to hold back her tears, but it was very difficult for her to do so. "I'm sorry, Sam, but I can't keep my emotions in check. It's been so many years, but it's still like a pain in the ass. I understand you very well, and I will try to help you. But I would really like to hear more about your relationship with your husband. How did the family receive you?" "He had relatives." "Yes, of course. Benjamin Lily's mother. She's a very nice, kind woman. She took me right away as her own daughter. And things were great with Benjamin, too. He and I never even had a serious fight in all that time," interrupted a woman. "Wait, Benjamin Evans, the famous hotelier, was your husband?" Nancy smiled. "Yeah, and you knew him a little." "I was an experienced young man when Evans was basking in his glory, but I remember well the buzz about his death. The men in our department at the time were very surprised that it was closed very quickly. Turns out you've been named as the lead defendant. That's how it works. Nobody even wanted to listen to me. The investigator who was in charge of the case asked only provocative questions. Somebody told him that Benjamin had a mistress. I made him jealous the day before. There was an incident like that. No. I still remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I don't mean the day Benjamin died, but what happened the day before. We were invited to the banquet by Benjamin's friend Kevin. They'd been friends since high school, and then Benjamin took over the company when his dad died. So out of the goodness of his heart, Benjamin asked him to be his partner. Of course, I never got into my husband's business, so I'm telling you what I learned from him." Sam made an approving sign with his hand. "Take your time. Try to remember the little things, often the unimportant ones. At first glance, details helped to solve the crime. Until what time were you at the banquet? Nancy answered without hesitation. We left Kevin's at 10 p.m. Benjamin wanted to stay longer, but I was worried about my daughter. We had a little argument about it, and Kevin even tried to calm us down. He succeeded in reconciling us. We had another glass of champagne and drove home. I felt sick in the car, and my husband asked the driver to stop. I went outside for some fresh air, and we drove on. That is, the village. Basically, all at home, I immediately collapsed into bed because I was very tired and felt deathly weak. I remember I told my husband about it, and he was very surprised, as he was experiencing a similar sensation. Nancy smiled at her memories. Benjamin had made a joke, saying that we had been fed something that made us sleepy. He went straight to the bedroom, and I still had enough energy to take a shower. When I came back from the bath, Benjamin was already in a blissful sleep. He hadn't even changed his clothes since his daughter had been taken to her room by her mother-in-law. I decided not to disturb Lily. Nancy decided to take another break. Sam understood how hard it was for this young woman to remember. He really wanted to cheer her up, but he couldn't find the words that would soothe the mother's heart even a little. She asked me, "Should I go on or is it enough?" No, go ahead. I would like to know why the operatives came to the conclusion that it was you who took the life of your husband. The woman took a deep breath, as if about to dive into the water. I woke up to my mother-in-law screaming. Lucy was screaming too. Stop. There's a new character in your story. Who is it? Lucy, Lily's daughter from her first marriage. Benjamin's mom jumped out of her first marriage at 18. Stupid high school sweetheart. They split up later. Daughter Lucy stayed with her mother. Benjamin's father did the honorable thing and adopted her from Lily. I didn't see her much because Lucy was abroad all the time. Did she have a business or a job there? I'm not sure. And to be honest, I wasn't really interested in the life of a spectacle. She was all tough, all socialite. So you're saying you don't have a relationship with your husband's half-sister? I wasn't trying to impose my society on Lucy. I don't like people who pretend to be something they're not, when in reality, they're just empty inside. Lucy's empty too. Even Lily wasn't very good with her, even though she's her own daughter. By the way, that husband's sister was the loudest one that morning, screaming that I was the one who sent Benjamin to the other side of the world. Pardon me, but the weapon was found. Nancy looked at her hands and hid them immediately. They were common and nice, but it is unknown how they ended up in my hand. When I woke up, I didn't realize what was going on. But even then, I had those damn scissors in my hand. The woman threw herself on the back of the couch. Sam, I can't take it anymore. It's very hard. Let's stop, of course. You've told me enough today, and I even know where to begin our investigation. She asked in an indifferent tone. Where? I want to talk to Evan's neighbors, coworkers, past and present. Your late husband. It would be nice to talk to Lily too. That won't be possible. My mother-in-law died of a heart attack shortly after all this happened. I didn't even get to visit her grave, and Benjamin was buried without me too. Sam saw that Nancy was ready to cry again, but Ethan returned. So they had to cut the conversation short. The man secluded himself in his lover's room, and Nancy went to the kitchen, where her sister was already wielding a knife. Vanessa, let me help you. Yes, I will correct myself now. I will send all this beauty in cabbage with oil, and it will be possible to taste my specialty salad. After the bright speech, the elder sister looked at Nancy and almost cried herself when she saw in what condition the unfortunate one was. Putting aside the implements of labor, Vanessa hugged her sibling relative. How can you look like you've been put through a washing machine? Sam is very experienced. He is a true master of his craft. Trusting him, Nancy exhaled. I don't have any other options. You were right when you said I couldn't do it alone. Vanessa suddenly winked slyly. Hey, did you notice Sam looking at you like that? I can't even find the words, but it's a hard look. I think he liked you. He's single, by the way, so he's not missing an opportunity to get to know Vanessa. I'm not in a situation to have an affair. I have a daughter to find. The landlady grumbled, and one thing does not prevent another. That night, Nancy fell asleep earlier than usual. The excitement, the nervous tension, had sapped her strength. But Nancy came out. In her dream, she saw children playing ball by the seashore. One girl caught the ball and held it out to her mother to play with me. When she woke up with a wet pillow, she realized that she had been crying in her dream. This fact stunned the woman because it was the first time this had happened to her. Sam called 3 days later to find out something, and I had a sniff. I guess I was on the trail. But a very urgent matter has come up, and I can't refuse to help my good friends. By the way, there's a girl missing out there too. She went to a competition in the regional center, and there she slipped away with her instrument. What kind of musical instrument? She's learning to play the violin, and they send her to competitions all the time. That's what her mom told me. It's been 2 days. I haven't heard a peep from you guys. I understand everything, Sam. I can imagine how worried the child's parents are. Help them out. I'll wait. No, I'm taking you on a special assignment to a place with a romantic name. But more than 10 years ago, there was an emergency there that stirred up the whole neighborhood. This case was even written about in the local press. So you can go online. Or should I ask Ethan? If in a nutshell, a local resident went to the river laundry from the floor to sleep, and there is a shoebox with an infant. Nancy felt she was having trouble breathing, and what about this baby? I have no idea, but I think you should pay a visit to this very place. It's time to ask the old-timers. Maybe that woman is still alive. It's not far by train or bus, is it? Nancy thanked the private investigator for the useful information and began to hurriedly pack. Vanessa, I have to leave for a while on our detective's errand. The older sister raised her eyebrows in surprise. Oh, this is getting interesting. Where are you going to go to investigate? There's a village not far away with a very funny name. Sam said that about 10 years ago, a small child was found in the river there. And what do you think? It's your daughter. Babies are dropped off almost daily, so don't get your random facts out of whack. Vanessa, the timing is consistent. It was August, and Benjamin died in August. It still doesn't prove anything. Even if the intruders took the child, why would they drive a few hundred kilometers to pick him up? Well, it's possible, though. We don't know why they kidnapped your daughter. Go to it. Or if you want, wait till the weekend, and I'll take you out. No, I have to go tonight. Nancy made it home without adventure. The village looked like a series of gingerbread houses, the kind you often see in illustrations in children's books. As a child, she herself had dreamed of living in such a house and painted plait-bands. The woman walked along the street, but did not see a single living soul. She involuntarily burst out a question. I wonder if anyone lives here or has everyone left. She did not expect anyone to answer her half-whispered question, but a cheerful female voice sounded from somewhere off to the side. We had few survivors left, and even fewer walkers. Nancy began to turn her head, and the rustling of leaves was heard around. Then a woman about 50 years old appeared. She had a handful of seeds in the palm of her hand, and she deftly threw a few into her mouth. There was a distinctive sound, and immediately the husks flew onto the country road. At that moment, Nancy suddenly remembered that it was forbidden to litter in public places. In the colony, one could be put in the punishment cell for such things. Probably her look was so eloquent that the villagers unraveled it. Everyone here is spitting on the cleanliness of the streets, and we only have 2 of them. You can count the inhabitants on your fingers. So we have to fight boredom with various means. They're good at calming everyone down. I immediately buy several packs to spare. Oh, why am I talking to you about stove seeds? You must have come here on business. Nancy got worried. Yes, I read on the internet that you found a baby in a box here about 10 years ago. I'd like that. The women joyfully welcomed the newcomer back into their arms. This impulse stunned Nancy, and she tried to free herself, but the villagers were not embarrassed by the newcomer's behavior. She cheerfully clambered for the territory. You've come right to the right place. It was me and Aunt Clara who caught that box. There was a pretty girl on it, painted and written in a foreign language. Nancy felt the blood rush to her head. Benjamin had given her low-heeled boots before her daughter was born because her feet had been severely cut off in the last few months of her pregnancy. The gift came in a brightly colored box, and her husband quite remarked, Specially ordered just for you just yesterday, this exclusive pair arrived from Italy, meaning they're handmade. The boots cost a fortune. Nancy put the boots on right away and threw the box in the closet. Hey, where'd you go? Been here and gone. The woman was sewing Nancy's sleeve. Is there anything else you're interested in? Did Nancy lose her numbness? Yes. I'd like to know what happened next. She rolled her eyes. There was nothing. Aunt Clara's husband, they have him in that house on the river. That is, Clara also lived with a poet and a sorrowful poet. And Sevastianov is already in his second year. How did he introduce himself? If you wish, I'll take you to the Broad. Thank you. I don't think that's necessary. You've told me everything you can. Tell me, is that box still there by any chance? Zelenka gave another triumphant cry. I thought at the time that the time would come when people would ask about that box. Aunt Clara threw it away at once for no reason. It was too much cardboard, and I picked it up. I really liked the girl in the picture and even cut it out. Do you want me to show you? I want to show you. Then follow me. My name is Wendy. Nancy could barely keep up with her village guide. She did not take in what the cheerful woman was telling her, as she had little interest in life by the sea. In the fall, the landlady invited her into the house, and the guests at once saw in the dark hallway a fragment of a brightly colored box. Now she had none left. That in that box was her little daughter. Now it remained to find out who had decided to massacre her defenseless daughter in such a brutal way 12 years ago, and also very much wanted to know in what orphanage the little girl was sent. I could not answer exactly to this question. Who knows? Probably taken to the district hospital first. There used to be a children's ward there, but maybe they send it straight to the city. No one can answer that now. The district police officer has changed, and the new one doesn't know anything about that story. Thank you for the detailed story. Nancy considered her mission accomplished, but the landlady tugged at her sleeve again. Where do you think you're going? Don't be in a hurry to stay with me for half an hour. I've just given you some tea with these pens. When I'm bored, I give up all custody. I used to work in the cafeteria at the high school. I learned to bake there. Nancy didn't want to offend this kind woman, so she accepted her invitation. Aunt Wendy talked passionately about village life as she drank her herbal tea and pens with relish. She didn't notice how the time flew by. Only casually glancing at the clock, she couldn't believe her eyes. Oh my God, it's 6:30 p.m. I've missed the bus. Aunt Wendy readily offered to let you stay the night. And then you can go in the morning. No, I have to go back to town today. Why are you in such a hurry? Nancy was confused. She couldn't tell this from a complete stranger about the purpose of her visit. But Wendy had a discreet voice. She stared at her guest for a moment, then slapped herself on the knee. Oh, I'm an old fool. Don't you dare. What's the price? Was that box really your daughter in it? Nancy whispered. Yeah, you guessed it. It was my little girl. She was only 2.5 months old. Me and the women thought Mother Cuckoo planted the box. So it turns out your baby was stolen from you. It turns out that way. What about me? What's going on in the world? How can we go on living? I'll walk you to the train station. The train stops there for a minute, but you're young enough to catch it on time, and she'll be there in 40 minutes. Aunt Wendy led her a short way through a small wood. Nancy could hardly keep up with her and thought at that age such a sprightliness could only be envied in this woman. But she immediately pictured the empty Maria Street and realized there was nothing to envy. The electric train arrived right on schedule. Nancy said a warm goodbye to Wendy and promised to visit her if she could. It was cool in the half-empty car, and Nancy decided to move to the next car. Maybe there would be more passengers there and it would be warmer. She stepped out into the vestibule and immediately heard the wistful sounds of a violin. She wanted to know who was entertaining the passengers. The next carriage was much warmer and the few passengers were listening like a girl, a teenager playing the violin. Nancy herself had attended music school in her distant childhood and was even prophesied to have a creative future. But she never thought about a career as a musician. The girl perfectly mastered the instrument and masterfully performed well-known works. Having finished playing, she carefully put the violin in a modest case. Nancy had unmistakably identified it as a piece of junk that could be purchased in any specialty store. The thought flashed through her mind that the girl clearly had talent. Too bad she has to make money this way. She tossed a few coins onto the case. The other passengers donated to the young musicians as well. Whoever could spare as much as they could. Nancy sat by the window and soon passed out. She remembered the day gone by and thought about what to do next. The train jerked and a metallic voice announced the final citizenship. Passengers are kindly requested. Do not forget your belongings in the carriage. Since Nancy had set off at Marusi's, Marusi was light on her feet. She let this appeal pass her ears. The clock above the station entrance showed 7:45, and Nancy thought probably Vanessa and Ethan are already worried and Robert. I promised to show you how to make paper. It turns out I've tricked him, because by the time I get there, it'll be 9 o'clock. Before Nancy could scold herself properly, she heard someone's noisy breathing behind her. She wanted to turn around, but at the same time there was a ringing voice. "Auntie, may I walk with you for a little while?" Nancy answered machine quickly she could, and only then did she stop. The voice belonged to a young violinist, who only half an hour ago had been entertaining the public in the train by playing the violin. A bad feeling crept into the woman's soul. "Wait a minute, why are you alone?" the girl replied defiantly. "I am old enough to move around the city unaccompanied, but if you are so interested, I can tell you that I am returning home from my grandmother's, where my loving parents are waiting for me." During her years in the colony, Nancy had learned to distinguish lies from truth. There was no sincerity in the girl's voice, and she didn't believe her. "Tell me, do your parents know that you earn money in the electric trains?" This question caught the girl off guard, which was evident on her face. But she kept lying anyway. "Auntie, I didn't do anything like that." "Is it a crime to play on the train?" "Of course not. But you're too young to earn money that way. I was just playing. A woman gave me a candy bar, and that's all. I didn't take any money." The girl's whole light was protesting, and her insolence was astounding. The teacher woke up. "How are you not ashamed to lie?" "I myself personally put a few coins on the case." The girl grumbled, "Could have thrown at least rubles. 100 is money. All adults are greedy to the point of disgust, and my so-called daddy bought up too." It was like an electric shock ran through Nancy's body. "Hey, violinist, you didn't run away from home, did you?" The girl froze for a few seconds with her mouth hanging open. Nancy rushed after the young stranger, and then they were gone. For about half an hour, she walked about the square in Nancy to see the little moon, but only wasted her time. Yes, Aunt Nancy, hello. You screwed up all the way home. She thought about the 2 encounters she'd had today, both seemingly random, but there was something about them that kept Nancy on her toes. Before she could even touch the bell, the apartment door swung open. Vanessa pounced on her with reproach. "Where the hell have you been? We've been worried sick. We don't need you to be missing." Nancy kissed her sister. "Don't square. It's a good thing I caught the train, or I'd have had to spend the night in the countryside or even in an empty field. You have no idea what I've learned." Of course, it wasn't without its adventures. Vanessa patted her shoulder. "Okay, you'll tell me later. For now, I'll feed you dinner. Although normal people don't eat at this late hour. I'm not really hungry. My mother fed me with these hands in the fall from a very kind aunt. By the way, she told me a lot of interesting things." "Do you know where your girl is?" Nancy waved her hands. "Alas, no. On the contrary, I'm still more confused. But there is a certainty that my little girl is alive." Vanessa shook her head and cautiously remarked to Nancy, 12 years have flown by, and your daughter is definitely not a baby anymore." The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. "You know, I hadn't really thought about it. In my mind, she's still a tiny little lump of pink." Sam called. "He had some news for you too. He even wanted to stop by, but when he heard you were gone, he changed his mind. You've clearly hurt a man's heart." Nancy blushed. "Vanessa, don't make up things that aren't there. Sam just really wants to help me. I think he's a very decent man." Nurse muttered. "Decent people fall in love too. It's not forbidden by law, only in bed." Nancy remembered that she had not had time to tell her sister about the adventure in the train car. As she fell asleep, she thought, it's all right. I'll tell you tomorrow. I wonder where the violinist is now and why her parents are so negligent of their duties. In the morning, the impressions left after yesterday's trip had dulled a little. Nancy no longer found it strange that a girl unknown to her was earning money by playing in a train carriage. So at breakfast, she spoke briefly only of the trip to Maria. Together with her sister Nancy, escorted the race to the door of the school. The boys looked at her hopefully. Aunt Nancy, and you won't run today. I promised yesterday to show the boys a paper crane. Nancy felt ashamed that she had let her nephew down. Do you want me to pick you up from school and we'll go straight to the cranes? Robert was delighted at the offer. I want to. Aunt Nancy, you just show me and I'll do it myself. I can put things together fast. That's what Mom says, and so does the teacher. Robert disappeared behind the school fence, and Vanessa pulled her sister along. Get in the car, Mary Poppins. I'll keep you under lock and key until tonight so you don't fool my kid again. He's very sensitive. He only gets offended by women for every little thing. We made it home. As we pulled up, he handed the sisters each a small bunch of flowers. Perhaps it's not quite appropriate in this situation, but I don't want to be rude. Vanessa was on a roll. Thank you, Sam. You've shortened this boring morning. My Ethan has completely forgotten that his wife should get flowers once in a while. I hope you're here with some news. Yes, I did manage to find out something once the three of us were in the apartment. Nancy suddenly asked, Did you find the missing girl? I was surprised. I don't understand. Which girl are you talking about? The one your friends are looking for. You must have forgotten that you told me about it yesterday. Yes, I forgot. I'm under a lot of pressure at the moment, so I can't keep it all in my head. But thanks for the reminder. By the way, it's an amazingly interesting case. Can you imagine a 12-year-old girl deciding to go on the run? She had been working out a plan for a long time and decided to implement it during a trip to the contest. Nancy asked, What pageant? Sam shrugged. I didn't really understand it myself, but something to do with music. In short, the girl has several talents, including criminal ones. After the event, she wasn't on the bus. The police were called immediately, but nothing concrete. The mom's a black cloud. She's a good friend of mine. Vanessa asked about the dad. Probably doesn't care. There's a separate story with the father. Just before his daughter disappeared, he said he was leaving her for another woman. That's probably what caused her to run away. Little adventurous. Sam suddenly exclaimed to O. I've got a picture. I pulled a color photograph out of my pocket. Nancy looked at the photograph, and her face turned white as a sheet. The detective noticed the woman swaying and rushed over to her. Are you ill? An indignant smile appeared on the unfortunate woman's face. It's nothing. A little dizzy. It'll pass. I just didn't expect to see this photo. After all, I had just talked to this girl last night and even scolded her. I immediately suspected something was wrong with her. The older sister and the man looked at each other in surprise. The man picked up the photograph that had fallen out of Nancy's hands from the floor. I think our joint investigation is taking an interesting turn. Please tell me about yesterday's meeting. Nancy had already gained complete control of herself and described the scene in the train carriage in detail. She ended her narrative with the words, If I had known that her mother was looking for this girl, I would not have let her go, or I would have gone straight to the police. Try to reassure the client not to make a fuss in vain. If I were you, I'd do exactly the same thing. And after all, you can't catch every teenager in town. They usually have them in the evenings. Ira was more than willing to give me a hint. Hardy near our entrance, too. Every night young people gather and can make noise until midnight. It was noticeable that Nancy was thinking hard about something. The older sister was about to continue the topic of youth gatherings, but Sam looked at her expressively. He realized how difficult it was for this woman to understand everything that was going on. And after all, she had been through so much turmoil in just the last few days. And that was without taking into account the years that the unfortunate ones had to spend in prison. Aang had asked his friend, with whom he had once worked together, to raise the case of the businessman Evans. It was true that so far he had only familiarized himself with it superficially, but some blatant points spoke of a gross violation of the investigative process. He did not want to burden the women with unnecessary information, because he wanted to understand everything himself first. But he decided to share one thought with Nancy. Don't get me wrong, but I had an idea to introduce you to Adriana's mom. She didn't immediately realize who she was talking about, so she asked Adriana again. Yes, the missing girl's name is Adriana, short for Adriana. If my guess is correct, no, it's correct. I wanted to ask you to arrange a meeting with the girl's mother. After all, we're friends in need and will understand each other. Besides, I'll be able to tell her that I saw her daughter on the train, that she's alive and well. I think it will calm her down a little bit. Thanks for understanding. Nancy's mom is a good friend of mine. A long time ago, we lived in the same neighborhood and even went to school together. Then my parents got an apartment in a new neighborhood and Nancy moved to another city. But we always kept in touch with her. Unfortunately, her family life didn't work out so well. In short, the poor thing was suffering. And then two misfortunes coincided. Her husband left her and her daughter disappeared. So she's in desperate need of support right now. Brendan promised to contact Nancy soon. But before that, he wanted to find out about the two characters who had so far remained in the shadows. The meeting in the main office of the Vega Corporation was coming to an end when the cell phone on the CEO's desk began to vibrate. Kevin glanced unhappily at the gadget, but did not answer the call. To keep his mind on the meeting agenda, he tossed the cell phone into the desk drawer. The subordinates were glad for the unexpected pause, but Kevin did not let them relax. I want to remind everyone here that discipline is paramount. Each of you has a responsibility to support the common cause and motivate your departments to do the same. As if on cue, the department heads started making notes in their notebooks. Kevin enjoyed his moment of greatness and looked down on everyone. He liked to be understood half-heartedly, but he liked to be obeyed even more. Even in his high school years, Kevin made bids for leadership, but he couldn't compete with Benjamin Evans. Not him, but Benjamin was always sent to the Olympiads and various forums. Evans had a phenomenal memory, so it was easier for him to study. The girls were crazy about him too. They didn't pay attention to Kevin. His bitter father also had a prominent position in the city, and Kevin's parents lived from paycheck to paycheck. But all these disadvantages did not prevent the boys from being friends. True, everyone had a different concept of friendship. Benjamin believed that with a comrade should share the joys and give him a shoulder in a difficult hour. And Kevin sought only benefits from such a relationship. But Kevin skillfully concealed his thoughts and for decades nurtured a plan to outdo his rival. The first time Kevin put a friend a pig when he was going to marry a girl he also liked. In order to upset the wedding, Kevin went rogue. He decided to get irrefutable dirt against Benjamin's fiancée. To this end, he invited the girl to a birthday party and got her drunk, which he fell senseless on the couch, arranged a photo shoot with the participation of another scumbag. The very next day, as if by accident, he planted the racy photos on a friend. Later, when Benjamin was tearing up with anger, how could she do that to me? I trusted her like I trusted myself. Kevin came at first call to comfort fellow Benjamin. All lovers are blind, and you too are blinded by a strong feeling. But don't despair. You will meet a girl who will be worthy of being your wife for almost 15 years. Benjamin was afraid to get serious with the farer. Kevin was also having mixed success on the personal front. But thanks to a friend, he'd made a name for himself, and it was after Evans asked him to be his partner. Kevin, you don't have to do much of anything. Your only job is to keep your nose to the wind. Kevin needed no further explanation. He immediately set about establishing strict order in the company. Benjamin's father had just died, and he appreciated Kevin's help. I had no idea you were such a good organizer. If this keeps up, I'm going to promote you to the board of directors. It was the height of careerist aspirations. But as time went on, Benjamin seemed to forget about his promise. And then Kevin learned from third parties that his friend met some uneducated wiretap and was going to marry her. He couldn't help himself and expressed his resentment to Evans. "Benjamin didn't expect you. I thought we were friends. And you didn't even tell me you had a girlfriend." Benjamin was surprised. "I don't think my personal life is anyone's business. And anyway, Kevin, childhood is a thing of the past. You have to look at life as an adult. Okay, Benjamin and I will take note, and I won't bother you anymore." After the wedding, Benjamin became completely estranged from his friend. He stopped sharing his plans with him, which suggested the end of the trust limit. The resentment accumulated day by day imperceptibly degenerated into hatred. Kevin's inventive mind began to think over a plan of another mischief when he unexpectedly found an accomplice in the person of his half-sister Benjamin. Lucy has long made ambiguous signs of attention, but he tried not to notice them. For one thing, the friend's sister was much older than he was. But the main drawback was her not tolerable character. She even brought her own mother to a heart attack more than once. The combination of all these reasons made Kevin behave with Lucy extremely cautiously. But everything changed after the wedding of a friend. Kevin noticed right away that Evans had gone cold on him, and then Lucy added fuel to the fire. One evening after a family tea party, she caught him in the hallway. "Kevin, can I have a word with you?" He had the right manners, so he answered, "Of course you may. What man can refuse when he's asked for something? Pretty woman." Lucy flirtatiously waved her eyes. "Although you're lying out of your ass. But it still feels good." "Me too. So what was it you wanted to tell me?" Lucy moved closer to him. "I overheard Benjamin talking to someone on the phone. He said he was planning to reorganize the company, cut the man. You're smart, and you know very well that such events usually involve downsizing. I've noticed your brother hasn't been very forthcoming with you lately. I think his own blood is affecting him badly. Is it excitement, pulse, temples, and Kevin?" asked Lucy. "You laid it all out to me for a reason." The woman pressed herself against him. "You got it right. I want justice, and I'm not used to being second best." Lucy sank her lips into his. Everything further happened by inertia, and Kevin found himself in Lucy's bed. But her passion quickly faded and she changed to a businesslike tone. "Kevin, you and I can form a mutually beneficial alliance. Our interests are aligned." "True," he grudgingly replied. "I guess we do. But I don't know where you're going with this yet." She lightly touched the tip of his nose with her finger. "Okay, you get it. It's written all over your forehead that you hate Benjamin. I've hated him since I was a kid, too, because he took my mom and his wife away from me. I despise her, too. I can't stand the sound of her voice. Stupid sheep. You don't know your buddy's gonna be a daddy soon, do you? Hee hee. How do you know such details?" How? From a camel, my classmate. My ex works at the clinic. She told me. That's the reason I decided to stay here. "Lucy, can you answer one question honestly? Please. You have business overseas. Isn't that enough for you?" Lucy couldn't stop laughing for 5 minutes. "Kevin, is this the business of meetings, dogs, and kitties? I had this piece thrown at me to shut me up, and Benjamin got the whole pie, and I have to make it right. And you're gonna help me." "You will." "Yeah, I did." The accomplices began working on a plan. They came up with several options, but each had major flaws, so time worked against them. They had to take drastic action shortly after the Evanses gave birth to their daughter. Lucy was on the verge of panic. Kevin just a little more and all would be lost. Benjamin's secretary told me in confidence that Benjamin had a long discussion with his lawyer the other day. My heart tells me he's going to write a will. You on the board can find out. The man promised well. I'll try to find out, because Kevin never took the easy way out. He went tricky again and invited a friend's lawyer he knew to a restaurant. There he gave him a good meal and extracted the necessary information. The lovers decided to act immediately. Kevin's anniversary was just around the corner. Lucy slipped a potent sleeping pill into the glasses of the spouses, hoping that they will quickly get tired and it will be possible to simulate a road accident. But the wife was in a hurry to get home. When the drug had not yet had time to take effect, they had to change the plan on the fly. Memories of that terrible evening caused a stigma, horror, and disgust in the soul. Although 12 years have passed, but he clearly remembers how Lucy stabbed the axe Benjamin under the ribs. Then she had cold-bloodedly laid the implement in sleeping Nancy's hand. The CEO's thoughts were interrupted by a suspicious sound. Kevin began to look around and even looked under the desk. Then he pulled out a desk drawer. "Buddy, it's a simple one. Completely forgot I had pushed you in there." He sighed heavily. He said, "Yes, I'm listening to you." "No, I couldn't answer right away. I had a meeting." "You know about it very well that you are sure? Or is it another rumor again?" "Okay, I'll check it out, and please don't get ahead of yourself." Kevin turned off his phone and froze in his chair in an uncomfortable pose. Lucy had just informed him that the DA's office had reopened the old Evans death case, seeking accomplices, and announced that the private investigator was questioning their old housekeeper who had worked at Evans' house for many years. The man's eyes darkened and his throat was crushed by an invisible hoop. He wanted to reach for the phone to call the receptionist, but he didn't have time because suddenly darkness fell upon him. The last thing Kevin thought about was the thought that any evil would not go unpunished. The secretary was worried by the lack of signs of life in the principal's office. Only at the end of the working day, the girl thought that the chief was asleep and half-quietly called Kevin. "Can I get you some coffee?" But there was no answer. Then the girl, after a long hesitation, decided to come closer. She realized that the chief was dead and loudly screamed X-ray. Already in the evening of the same day learned of the death of one of the conspirators. He thought that the punishment had caught up with one criminal, but the accomplice would also get his. The meeting between Nancy and Nancy took place the very next day. By all accounts, he called his buddy to reassure her and told her that Nancy had seen her. When the doorbell rang, Nancy was home. The one woman who stood at the door immediately liked her such an open, slightly frightened look. "Please excuse me, Nancy. I won't take up much of your time. You just tell me how my Adriana looked. Is she doing well?" It wasn't until she said that Nancy realized who she was looking at. "You're Nancy, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Come in. I'll make some tea and we'll have a talk." While Nancy was making tea, Nancy said, "You see, you probably think I've been mean to my daughter and that's why she ran away. It's not like that. I would do anything for her. She's my whole world. But my father and I didn't get along. He couldn't love her, no matter how hard I tried. But every year he grew to hate her. I'd like to tell her that Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, that she has to go home. I'll be sure to answer all her questions." Nancy finally paused, and Nancy managed to say, "Don't burn yourself. It happens to teenagers. They're all extremes at that age. No halftones. Everything's gonna be okay. I don't understand about the questions. Do you still have something? Look, I'm not trying to judge you, but I hope I find my daughter someday. How do you communicate? What kind of questions do they have? What are the concepts?" Nancy sighed. "You see, Adriana is not our own daughter. We adopted her when we found out we weren't going to have children of our own. Or rather me. I didn't want my daughter to find out at all. But my husband opened her eyes wide. He didn't tell her. It's just that when we fought, Martin was never one to hold back on the language. Lately, he's been yelling that he's sorry we took Lena. It's not that Adriana's a wonderful girl. She just has a lot of resentment right now. We don't necessarily need to find her so she doesn't do anything wrong." Nancy put her hand on Nancy's arm. "You will definitely find her, we will. We'll start walking around town in the evenings from today. There's no way we won't meet her." Nancy wiped her eyes. Looked at Nancy. Sam was not mistaken. "You really are a very wonderful and kind woman." Nancy was embarrassed. For a week now, she and Nancy had been walking around town in the evening, skirting bus stops, alleyways, parks. A couple of times they heard people say that there was a violinist playing in the street somewhere. But they were late both times. Adriana was already gone. Nancy kept trying to cheer Natasha up. She had already bonded with the woman and was no less worried about her daughter than Nancy herself. This time they sat on a bench in the park. Nancy called Sam, asked where they were, and told him to stay put. He showed up 15 minutes later and started talking right away. "I've been under a lot of pressure lately. Nancy, Let's start with you first. Lucy was arrested last night. She's the one responsible for her brother's death, and she's the one who organized the whole thing with the help of her lover. It's Kevin. Yes, it is, and for some reason I thought it was. Oh, Adriana saw them too. She didn't know what to do, whether to run away from her mom or run to her mom. Nancy shouted to Adriana, daughter, Daddy doesn't live at home anymore, he has left. Please come back. Nancy powerlessly sank down on the bench and cried. Adriana stood for a second longer and then rushed to her mama. Don't cry, don't cry. Mama Nancy turned away. Jesus, maybe there would come a time when she could hug her daughter like that. Sam's phone rang, he answered it and smiled. I suggest we continue the conversation at Vanessa and Nancy's. Vanessa just called to say she had set the table. Nancy looked at Sam in surprise. Vanessa didn't say anything about having an event today. Nancy stood up. We'll go, let's not get in the way. Sam shook his head negatively. No, you should definitely attend as well. Seeing the two women and the girl staring at him in amazement, Sam spread his hands. I'll explain everything, but it's better to do it at home. Vanessa, as soon as they entered, immediately began to invite everyone to the table. She was so fidgety that Nancy immediately suspected that her sister was aware of what Sam wanted to tell. At first, there was silence at the table. Then Nancy couldn't stand it any longer. Sam, you'll forgive me if Lucy confesses. Yes, Nancy, you'll be exonerated. Plus, you'll get your business back, all the Evans family property. Nancy smiled sadly. I would give it up without regret to keep Benjamin alive and to find my daughter. Sam set his fork aside. But it was time to continue my story. After Benjamin died, you went to prison, and Benjamin's mother died of a heart attack. There was only one obstacle left in the way of money. Is this your daughter? Nancy shuddered. Sam's words sounded so ominous. Lucy and Kevin had decided to get rid of her altogether. Apparently, there was still some humanity left in them, if only a little, and they couldn't do it themselves. They decided she had to die on her own. They drove to the first village they could find and threw the baby in the river. At least it was in a box. By a happy coincidence, the box was fished out in time by local women. Lucy and Kevin put on a comedy act. Lucy sobbed on camera, cursing those who had stolen her only kidney. Kevin promised to tear to pieces those who did this to his best friend's daughter. The girl was never found. Maybe they weren't looking for her. Gradually, things quieted down. Lucy and Kevin became full-fledged business owners, at the same time pretty far away from this Colorado. One family made the decision to adopt or foster a child. More, of course, the wife wanted it. But the husband wasn't opposed to it either. They were very fortunate to be offered a child. The main thing is a perfectly healthy girl. The couple quickly settled all the formalities and became parents. True, the father very quickly realized that all this he does not like, and that he is used to be in the house of the Maine. And now the main thing is some dog. And it wasn't even his own. Now Nancy looked at him with uncomprehending eyes. Vanessa already had her hand on the pike. It was like she was waiting for something. And nothing happened. Nancy could feel it in the air too. That anticipation. Just like that, she didn't understand anything. She felt a steady gaze on her. Turned around. It wasn't hers that was watching. Staring very intently, and Nancy suddenly got a chill inside. How could it be possible for a girl stranger to look at her the way Benjamin had once looked at her? Nancy started to rise from the chair, but her legs would not hold her. Sam, tell me, is the girl who was thrown into the river and the one who was adopted the same girl? Vanessa slammed her palm on the table. Well, finally. Ethan, get the valerian quickly. I have a feeling I'm going to need it now. Ethan disappeared and then reappeared. Nancy hadn't seen him at all, hadn't noticed when he'd appeared at the table the first time. There was silence in the room, ringing and heavy. Nancy looked at Adriana. Tears were running down the girl's cheeks. So you didn't leave me, Nancy, who had finally realized everything that had just been said, jumped up and covered Adriana with herself. I won't give it to my daughter. I won't give it to you. Then burst into tears and sat on Adriana's desk and hugged her mom. Mommy, come on, you'll never stop being a mom to me. Nancy was crying too. Then Adriana hugged Natasha with one arm, and with the other Nancy smiled through her tears. Why? Is it possible to have two moms in our state? Lucy's trial was loud because Nancy was to be acquitted at the same time. That hearing was public. It was so crowded there was no place to sit. A family that everyone in town knew. A lot of people remembered that first case, the first time a young girl had been locked up, and most of them realized they'd locked her up for nothing. Nancy both drove her eyes around. She felt confidently dressed now. Nancy was fresh-faced. Adriana sat next to her, and Nancy sat next to her. They had been able to agree that day that they would make Angelina's life easier with their love, rather than make it harder with a showdown. Adriana was fine with that in general. First of all, she was madly glad that her mother had not abandoned her, that she had found her mom, that she was near her now. Secondly, she was near the person whom she had thought of as her mother since childhood, and now she couldn't think of her mother any other way. Sam sat at Nancy's right hand. He immediately sat down like that, and Nancy immediately blushed. She didn't realize what was happening to her. Not a young girl to blush, still blushed every time. Vanessa nudged her husband Science, the man who was not wrong. Say your predictions about Nancy and Sam. Ethan shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Sam proposed to her today. Vanessa was taken aback. What makes you think that? And so confidently. Vanessa looked at her husband in surprise. The devil knows. And suddenly he really guesses Xenia, in the form of confusion on the face of his wife, could hardly restrain laughter. Today, they went with Sam to buy a ring for the event. Lucy had been given a full ride. As she was led away, she screamed curses at Nancy, spitting and whispering like a snake. Nancy looked at her in horror. God, what does money do to people? They stepped outside and Nancy breathed in the air. Well, now that I am now full mistress of my home again, I invite everyone to visit. We should celebrate this and the many other things that have happened. They pulled into the store and headed towards the house. The evening was progressing. Beautiful men were grilling meat. The women were chopping salads, delicious wine, a bonfire, wicker chairs. Oh, where's Adriana? Nancy jumped up, searching for the girl with her eyes. Suddenly, a violin melody so beautiful and so sad, taking the soul. Sam stood up. Everyone surrounded Nancy. The woman looked at them. Vanessa, smiling at his wife, smiled at Nancy and smiled. Adriana, who was playing the violin, approached. Nancy saw that she was smiling as well. Nancy even looked around herself. She might get dirty. But then Sam appeared in the clearing like a wizard. He silently placed a bouquet of white roses at Nancy's feet, knelt down and handed her a ring box. If you don't become my wife, I'll die. Nancy looked at him fearfully. Had he forgotten she was a bunny? No, he hadn't. Men like Sam don't forget anything. Agree. Nancy looked at Adriana in surprise. It was the first time the girl had called her. Nancy nodded her head and immediately fell into Sam's arms and cried. Was it really impossible to believe? Had the black streaks ended? She sought out her daughter. Her daughter forgave her and called her mom. She'd been proposed to by the man she loved with all her heart. She didn't have time to speculate because Sam yelled, "No, ladies, that's not gonna work. I'm gonna go get a spring in everyone's step." Nancy took a look at all the women and realized that everyone was crying. The sight was so unusual and comical that she laughed. Vanessa followed her, then Adriana, and then Nancy couldn't take it anymore. When the men returned, wine glasses in hand, they almost fell over. Now those women who had been sobbing 3 minutes ago were laughing. So watch out for a fall. The men looked at each other, and Sam said, "Let's just wait. This madness has to end sometime." Ethan nodded. They settled down on the grass, stories lazily sipping their wine, looking at the women laughing.
Subscribe and click the bell.
The Posh Club was packed to the brim. Today, a famous rock band was performing here, and rich spectators, who had booked tables in advance, were lazily sipping cocktails, smiling and chatting, shortening their time in the VIP zone. Fireworks, A young guy in branded ripped jeans and a Versus jacket plopped down on the empty seat. Oh, there's our Liam. A blonde girl in a dress, more like a combination, caught his shoulder with long shining fingernails and imprinted a long and bright kiss on his cheek. Where the hell are you? They're about to start. They won't start without me. Grinning, the boy replied, Fine him, fine him, fine him for being late. The girl shouted, Pour. Someone's obliging hands quickly filled the glasses with viscous, amber-colored liquid. Here you go, thank you. The guy tilted his head slightly and downed the contents in one fell swoop. Cheers, cheers. The audience echoed once again, supporting the simple toasts. And as if on cue, the duty musical accompaniment began to wane. The lights went out, except for the dim little table lamps on the VIP tables, and the stage was illuminated with bright flashes of rapidly changing electric lights. Quickly galloping, shaking guitars, performers jumped on stage, and the hall exploded with screams and squeals, banging and whistling. The audience sang along to the musicians with pleasure, especially at the table where sat a recently arrived guy, the owner of a bright appearance on which foolish, gullible girls bite so much. His whole life at a more or less conscious age had gone on brightly and viciously. He knew no denial or lack of anything, and whatever he desired was always entirely at his service, whether it was people or things. Liam, as he was called by his parents, was from a family of a financial tycoon, owner of factories, cars, steamships, in the words of a famous poet. From childhood, he was sure that the whole world was created for people like him, and of course, for him to a much greater extent. No one ever dared to contradict him. In a private kindergarten, if the teachers tried something timidly object to his pranks, they immediately lost their jobs. At home, his mother only wiped away tears, trying to instill in her son at least some norms of accepted behavior. And his father, a stern man with a rich criminal past, only encouraged the hair. He was sure that otherwise he would grow up to be a wimp. In this world, you need time to bring everyone to their knees before someone else does it to you. He often said to his growing son. The son learned his lesson to the fullest. Already in school, of course, also private, he so skillfully mocked the teachers that they, notwithstanding, changed like gloves. After school, he studied abroad and in more than one place. In fact, in prestigious British universities, where you need not only to have a lot of money, but also to behave decently, Liam did not stay long. There, both he and his father were just politely shown the door, issuing, however, the appropriate documents on the completion of the number of semesters that he was able to hold out. And since he only needed a piece of paper for his education, nobody demanded anything more from him. A warm place under the sun, Liam, had already been secured before he was born, and the papers would be good enough to hang in a golden frame on the wall of a fancy office. Thus, having completed his education, the young major seamlessly and organically joined the community of the same, like himself, pro-lifers, regulars of nightclubs, regular buyers of elite boutiques, owners of expensive yachts and racing cars, the price tag of which was calculated by the same number of zeros, which equaled their rich inner world. During the day, these bats and predatory werewolves in branded rags sleep in their expensive caves, decorated according to the latest fashion, and towards evening, when the working people flock, barely moving in kilometer-long traffic jams to their miserable shacks, the majors come out into the light, which is no longer light, but a blue twilight, filled with the smell of wealth and luxury. This is how Liam's existence rolled along the dark nocturnal establishments, which sooner or later had to end in the same place where all other mortal beings find their last shelter. But the strongest of the world do not believe in it. They are touchingly sure that neither disease nor death itself has no power over them. And at this time in the provincial wilderness, in a village called Addix, lived a simple American family. The core of the village, and the only workplace for a couple hundred residents, was a half-breed farm. The family of Jacob and Nancy produced 6 fairly healthy children, the oldest of whom was Kathy, the first in line and the first helper to her mother, worn out by endless hard work and incessant labor. From a young age, Kathy learned the hardship and beauty of a simple life in nature, away from the noise and smog of the metropolis. Even the center of the village seemed to her, accustomed to the simple monotonous routine of village life, sparkling fireworks of celebration. That's because they were there only on holidays. At agricultural fairs, where they sold honestly grown with their own hands, fruits and vegetables, and bought rare sweets, which had never been in their village, chocolates, and Eskimo. Kathy, even at the age of 15, rejoiced at this simple gift of fate like a child. At the same age, she was bought her first adult dress and shoes with heels, to wear to the disco, to the village club. "Look, Kathy," her mother told her. "Don't you dare grow up again. Your father and I won't change your outfit every year." Kathy only lowered her eyelashes obediently. She never paid her parents back. They saved on everything. Kathy's daily routine was to rise at 5:30, no matter what time of year it was, wash up with ice water from a bucket for half a minute, and feed the cattle, cows, pigs, goats. Then Mother went to milk, and Kathy at that time prepared breakfast for the whole family: porridge, boiled eggs, bread from yesterday's dough, emitted a huge bubble in a wooden bowl. There were enough troubles in the village, but there were good things too. Does life consist only of everyday life and difficulties? And snow slides and summer berries, a field of spaciousness, the smell of honey, strawberries, and herbs. How did you go mushrooming? What baskets did you carry? Carrot tops, shining caps with copper greens, were salted in large basins, transferred into fried glass jars and into the cellar. The closest of Kathy's family was an old grandmother, her father's mother. She lived in a separate half of the house and was widowed long ago. She also helped with the household, digging in the vegetable garden, as they say. Of all her grandchildren, Grandmother loved Kathy the most. She took her to her house for a sleepover, gave her tea with herbs, baked pancakes, and sometimes let her sleep in the morning. But most of all, Kathy loved her grandmother's stories. Grandmother knew a lot of stories about mermaids living in the pool, about unknown animals that deep in the forest buried, about mysterious creatures that live near us, behind the stove, under the bench, in old baths. Little Kathy listened to it, opening her mouth, and then retold it to her mother and the younger ones, for which her mother always scolded her grandmother, saying, "Why do you make a child's head up?" Growing up, Kathy did not hurry to share information, more and more whispered with her grandmother, and no one, not giving away the secrets learned. She collected herbs and berries with her, went for mushrooms far from home, and was not afraid to get lost. By the age of 20, she became a pretty girl with a long, thick braid and thoughtful gray eyes. And in the big city, life was boiling. After another board meeting, her father told Liam to stay late. Waiting until the office was empty and signaling to the secretary to bring drinks, he gestured to the leather chairs. "Sit down." Liam nonchalantly unfolded himself, lazily sipping his coffee. Now he's going to get his brains straightened out, he thought, but he had not expected how far his ancestor would go in that direction. "It's time for you to settle down. You're already 30. His father had a habit of speaking in short, succinct sentences. "We need to make a suitable match. What? I don't understand. It's time for you to get married. That's what? Father said angrily. Do you have anyone in mind? Liam was confused. There are plenty of such goodies. Father made an angry face. I'm not talking about tramps. There's always plenty of that. But Brown, you don't marry street girls. I hope you realize that. Yes. Liam nodded. He knew from experience that when his father was in such a mood, it was better not to contradict him. I'm waiting for your nomination. A little softer, his father said. She should be cute, but not too much and not spoiled. The latter, I emphasize, especially. We don't want other people's children. You never know what's in a woman's belly if she's slept with a lot of men before you. Where am I going to get one of those? Sincerely surprised. In our time, wherever you want. Father shouted. Not my concern. Any other questions? He squinted. Yes. The son nodded his head. How are you going to check that you're not spoiled? Because you're definitely going to. I know you are. You're right, nodded the father. But it won't be me, but the doctor. And if the girl doesn't agree to such conditions. Liam grinned. Then you'll look for another one. Shrugged his father. You have a month for everything, so do your best. When his son left the office, his father took a deep breath, went to the bar hidden in the wall, and poured himself an undiluted chivas, added ice, stirred, and walked to the huge window separating his office from the outside world. Behind this transparent wall life was boiling, the endless streams of the avenue crawled, people were walking back and forth, cranes, lifting their iron-long arms to the sky, and a narrow strip of concrete encased in the river glistened between this delightful bustle. James loved life, loved the movement, the hustle, loved to manage it all and punish those who made a bad fuss. He had gotten so caught up in running the world that he hadn't noticed his own role had come to an end. Only a few pages left, 6 months at best. He would never have grandchildren, but at least he would have made a beginning. That's how he decided to end his earthly managerial endeavors. Think about it. Meanwhile, Liam said to his friend, pouring tequila on his grief, now find him a girl who hasn't been kissed. What century does he live in? Should I look for her in kindergarten? I'm sick of your attitude. Why in the kindergarten? The interlocutor smirked. There are simpler options. You know there are such fans, just this kind of strawberries. Well, Liam was interested. Where do they pick them? In the villages, he said, putting his foot on his leg and smiling. In the village clubs. In the village clubs? Liam had absolutely no idea what that was. His world consisted of metropolitan mazes, foreign resorts, and clean European towns. Look, his friend patiently told him. You take a car, type in the Navigator Rural Club, and choose some on the horns of hell there. You go there on Friday or Saturday night, and that's where they're herding. Are you sure? Liam frowned. How long would it take to get there? And if we use wings, what are you doing? My friend laughed. Wings do not fly there, if only wild geese. For real. Is there really such a thing? Liam thought, holding the leather steering wheel of his cool Audi with one hand. The old man's going mad. He drove off alone, so as not to embarrass himself by jabbing his finger into the middle of the list. There was a country club in Attucks. That's where he'd rushed off to get this idiotic task over with. He wasn't going to get married at all. Liam was really angry with his father, but there was nothing he could do about it. To hell with him. He'd get his own daughter-in-law if he had to. But I'm not going to jump around like a chained man. We'll sit in the house, as glued and children to do. That thought calmed the furious Liam down a bit. A few hours later, tired and sleep-deprived, he finally reached the end point of his route. He got out of the car and swore out loud. He had never seen such squalor before. The low one-story building made of gray, sometimes painted bricks, most of all resembled a stable. In his mind, of course. Enclosed by a low wooden fence painted a cheerful blue, it was hideous. Liam spat angrily and stepped closer. The peeling sign indicated that this was it. Sighing and reminding himself of his father, he stepped inside. "Who do you want?" The voice of an elderly aunt sitting at a table near the entrance made him wince, so confidently stony-faced was it. No one had ever dared to address him like that, but there was nothing to do, and he made a semblance of a smile on his face. "Do you have a disco here?" "Disco?" The aunt raised her painted eyebrows and smirked. "Well, here. But it's a bit early. Did you show up? You're not from around here?" "You look right. Kikimora." Liam snapped at her mentally. But he asked only when the beginning. When the young people have done all the work. The aunt laughed. "Maybe at 8 o'clock. Strange, I was told it starts early here." Liam grumbled. "Where is the nearest restaurant?" "Restaurant?" The janitor laughed. "What the hell?" Liam turned around and went to the car to wait for the disco to open. So he fell asleep, and when he opened his eyes it was already dark around, and all the windows in the club were shining brightly. Going into the dance hall, he expected to see anything but this. Between two low windows covered with faded yellow curtains, on a polished coffee table, stood a tape recorder, an old model he'd never seen before, and 2 speakers in wooden cases. On chairs along the walls sat girls in colorful dresses with curls and bright Barbie-style makeup. In the middle of a room the size of the bathroom of their mansion, on the creaky boardwalk floor, 3 couples were stomping in a slow dance. The guys were openly groping the girls, and they were giggling and making eyes at them. At the sight of the guy who entered, all heads turned toward him. The girls' eyes rounded, the guys tensed. Liam walked in silently and sank down on a vacant chair with worn upholstery. The chair beneath him crunched suspiciously. "What am I doing here?" Liam thought in anguish and rage, looking frankly at the astonished girls sitting next to him. The farther ones were whispering and giggling, looking at each other and covering their mouths with their palms, and those closer to him sat like at a funeral, eyes down, hands on their knees. Inviting those who don't dance. His friend's instruction flashed through his head, and he stood up resolutely, walking along the row of seated girls. "May I invite you?" Leaning over and putting out his arm bent at the elbow, he said to the first one with a long braid. You could sweep the floor, he thought, at the sight of this luxurious and natural maiden's jewelry. She looked up at him with serious eyes. "Me?" There was surprise and even fear in her voice. "You." He confirmed it with a radiant smile. The girl cautiously rose shyly, hiding her hands in the folds of her dress. Liam didn't have much idea how to dance to such strange things coming from the rattling speakers, but it was easy. Hugging his chosen one and shuffling his feet from one end of the room to the other, he soon achieved the same results as everyone else. The next song gave out at a different tempo, and everyone seated gradually joined in the dancing. Fidgeting to such music, Liam was no longer able and suggested to his lady to go out for a smoke. "I don't smoke." Shyly, she said, lowering her eyes again. "Really?" Liam marveled. "Looks like the right specimen." It went through his head. "Let's just get some air, shall we?" He said and led her away to the blue fence. "Let's get acquainted. I'm Liam." "Kathy," she said quietly and blushed. Liam marveled. He lit a cigarette, blowing the smoke away so it wouldn't blow in her face, and he didn't know what to talk to her about. "Where are you from?" she asked after a while. "I haven't seen you here before." "From the city," he said. It was necessary to keep incognito for the time being, so as not to scare off any frightened prey. "I'm here as a guest." Instead of answering, she only smiled, in that simple way that only his mother smiled at him. Her eyes, it seemed, could be searched to the very bottom of his soul and see nothing there but the same things on the surface. "You know, Kathy." Liam was about to tell an inspired lie, but he didn't know how to approach it. "I have to go now, but I'll be back for sure." And after a pause, he added, lowering his voice and looking her in the eye, "To you." The next day, the whole neighborhood was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. In some century, in their remote corner, there had been at least some worthwhile event. The arrival at the village club of a strange guy in a fancy car here was tantamount to the arrival of a prince under scarlet sails. The fact that Kathy was playing the part of Assel only added fuel to the fire, for she was considered by a small margin ahead of Cindy, the prettiest girl in this little world. "Did you hear that, girls?" Wendy the saleswoman was singing. "Kathy, we've got a prince." "Oh, it's no good," Kathy's grandmother lamented. "Princes don't just appear out of the blue." "Why are you talking about bad things, Grandma?" Kathy smiled, comforting her. "Besides, I'm not going to go out with him." "It doesn't matter," sorrowed Grandma. "Believe me, I've seen a lot of them." Meanwhile, Liam was consulting with the very friend who had taught him where to find a decent bride. "Okay, here we go," Kevin said. "Tell her that you're looking for a man with a pure soul who could heal your wounded heart, but without too many details, that she's the one you've been looking for all your life. And most importantly, that she, and she alone, could save you." "Why save me? What a load of crap. The consequences of unhappy love, brother." Kevin laughed. "From what else? I can't believe she'd fall for a divorce like that. You'll see." His buddy laughed shortly. "Can we bet, if you're ready?" "Fuck you." Liam waved his hand. "We don't have enough to do." A week later, he came again and told Kathy everything Kevin had taught him. But again, she just looked at him with her knave eyes and smiled. Kathy, putting as much tender feeling into his voice as he was even capable of, Liam looked at her with a long, penetrating stare. "Kathy, look at me. I'm just not myself. I don't eat. I don't drink. I don't sleep. Take pity on me, please." "What do you want?" The girl flapped her eyes in confusion. "Well, for starters, I want us to get on a first-name basis." Liam smiled. "How about it?" "Come on." Kathy smiled embarrassedly. And this time Liam left with nothing and was getting a little pissed off. His father only gave him 1 month, and this village idiot, even you, can't tell him. How could it be before the wedding? Together with Kevin, they decided that it was time to use the heavy artillery to get acquainted with his parents. Now Liam did not wait for the next weekend and arrived in the middle of the week, having found out in the administration, Kathy address, and came right to the court. He, of course, almost threw up from the unfolding picture of simple village life, but he courageously restrained himself. He took out of the car a huge bouquet of roses for his mother-in-law, a bottle of Chivas for his father-in-law, a whole bag of sweet nonsense for Kathy, and another bouquet of white roses for her, and a small modest box. In the box was a ring, and her mother only gasped when she saw the gem. Kathy, Liam, pictorially dropped to one knee, thinking only of how not to kill the suit pants. "I fell in love with you at first sight. All girls pale before your beauty. Please, will you marry me?" His chosen one was standing in the middle of the common room, completely confused. The whole scene didn't fit the interior of their rustic cottage, but it was the same with Cinderella and Prince Charming. "Don't even think about it," her mother persuaded her. "Happiness will come to you. Do you really want to spend your whole life here, just like me? Look around you. You're looking at the same thing here. Shoveling manure and having babies. Good man, daughter, solid," said the father, looking at the cupboard where his wife had thoughtfully put the coveted bottle. "What else to expect? Such are not lying on the road," and only Grandma remained true to herself. "Kathy, ask your heart, and you'll know if you need such a fate. This man doesn't seem real to me. Where did he even come from?" Kathy honestly recounted to her grandmother everything Liam had told her. I don't know. The old woman frowned. "He doesn't look unhappy." "Oh, he didn't. What's the rush?" Kathy didn't know what she was thinking or what she really wanted. "Really, this is my only chance to get out of here," she thought to herself. When she thought of Liam, however, her heart was absolutely calm, and she felt nothing but flattering pleasure at the fact that such an interesting and wealthy young man had chosen her out of all the girls in the world. "You'll be a fool if you don't leave," her friend Molly told her. If I had such an offer, I would not think for a second." And so it came to pass that Kathy was of the same opinion. "You don't turn down a chance like this, and rightly so," Molly assured her. "So what if you don't like it? Divorce and that's that. We do not live in the Middle Ages." Almost at the end of his father's deadline, Liam finally persuaded Kathy to go and meet his parents. Seeing her in the same dove dress, he wrinkled his nose in displeasure. "Put on something else, something more modern. There's nothing else." Kathy was embarrassed and tears came to her eyes. "All right, it's nothing." Liam caught himself, afraid of scaring her off again. "We'll go with you to the store and you'll choose something yourself." He took her to an expensive boutique where Kathy was completely confused. For one thing, it was only on the way that she found out where he was taking her. And then she had never traveled further than the center of the village in her life. Even the town next to the village was almost space to her, not like Los Angeles itself. The savvy consultants, seeing the situation, took the couple in stride and dragged Kathy into the fitting room, leading her, like a fashion show, to Liam. As a result, a classic cut suit with a skirt was approved because the girl absolutely refused to wear pants. Liam looked critically at her pale, bare legs, but however, slender and not badly shaped, and decided that a week or two in a good cosmetology salon would make something acceptable out of her. They took a bag, sunglasses, a silk handkerchief and gloves, and the salesman, very happy with today's proceeds, smiled at them with dazzling fake smiles. "Hello." Kathy smiled politely at Liam's parents, her eyes wide open, looking around the chic mansion. "Hello, darling." Her mother stepped towards them, hugging her future daughter-in-law affectionately. "Good afternoon." Father seemed to look approvingly, or Liam only wanted it that way. "Let's go to the table." The mother invited her son with Kathy. "The servants have already set everything long ago. We've been waiting for you." "We've stopped by," Liam said, sinking contentedly into a soft chair. "That's why we were delayed." Lunch was tolerable. Mother kept asking Kathy about her family, about her parents, about where she studied. Her father listened, occasionally throwing in a line or two, raising an eyebrow. Kathy splayed her hands, apologized, and ran out from the table into the hallway where her bags of belongings stood. Returning a moment later, she handed Liam's mother a small bundle. Please take this. I embroidered it myself." Blushing, she almost whispered, "A gift for you." Vanessa shrieked, ran in, hopped Kathy, spread the rug on the small table. Women, what can you take from them? After lunch, she and Kathy went out into the garden, and from there came the same delighted gasps. Only now the girl was admiring the flower beds and fountains, and Liam and her father were in the smoking room, opposite the big English window. "Well then," said James, "you've met the deadline." "Well done, but for God's sake, tell me, what swamp did you fish her out of?" "What difference does it make?" Liam shrugged. "The main condition is fulfilled. She's absolutely clean." "It seems so." Agreed, father. "Now we have to take care of the formalities." "Do I have to do that too?" Liam jumped up. "You could be the one to do it." Father grinned. "But I'm afraid you'd fail miserably." "No, I've put my mother in charge. She's a woman and she can find the right words. And then you'll have to sign a prenup. You think that's going to be okay?" "I don't think she'll even ask what the paper in front of her is." Liam grinned contemptuously. "Good," nodded his father. "Now for the main thing." Liam was wary. Try hard to get Kathy pregnant as soon as possible." Father said tiredly, "Do you understand me?" "But what's not to understand?" Liam stretched himself. "We'll do it." "But what's the rush?" "None of your business." Father snapped at me. "My mother and I want grandchildren. Consider it a parental whim." The wedding was scheduled in a week. All the necessary formalities went really quite smoothly. Vanessa, who had managed to find a common language with Kathy, convinced her of the necessity of the examination procedure. And she didn't read the prenup, just as Liam had predicted. But not because she didn't understand, no, she understood perfectly well that rich parents didn't want their property to fall into the wrong hands. But it seemed to her not as an offense, but as an additional proof of Liam's seriousness of intentions. He is not afraid of parental anger, marrying a girl from the village, who, of course, everyone considers a hunter of other people's goods, but not him. Her chosen one is not like that. He is kind and noble, and he loves her. Why else would he have her? There are 1,000 girls in front of him, all ready to run at the drop of a hat. Oh, if Kathy knew why this family needed her. These people didn't think of any love at all, least of all Liam. Maybe only his mother had any feelings for her future daughter-in-law, and her father needed her, very much, but only as a perfect incubator. Kathy's relatives were not invited to the ceremony. It was explained to her that it was not their custom. Liam promised her to go to her parents and other relatives afterwards to organize a real village wedding. Promised and forgot. Kathy's mother cried. Her father yelled and freaked out, but Liam quickly calmed them down with some money handed over in an envelope, telling them it was for upcoming wedding expenses. After considering how much they had been allocated for expenses, the mother immediately calmed down, smiled, and agreed to everything. The father, who received a case of whiskey in addition to the expenses, was no longer upset. Well, it is clear they are all cool city people. We are no match for them. Let them, and we'll celebrate in our own way. They had to celebrate without the young people, who immediately after the city wedding flew to a distant foreign resort. Kathy sent pictures that took the whole village by surprise. How lucky some people are, sighed enviously friends. What a lottery ticket. Dan, but why did he choose her? Kathy herself was as if in a parallel universe. In 1 month, her whole life had changed 180 degrees. She was now a married woman, and her husband, who looked like a foreign movie actor, had thrown the whole world at her feet. At least it seemed that way to her. After the Italian resort, they returned to Los Angeles, where a new mansion, a little smaller than her parents', but no less chic, was waiting for them. Father and mother, welcoming their son and his wife to their home, inquired casually whether they could expect grandchildren soon. Kathy became embarrassed, turned pink, and lowered her eyes but said nothing. At home, Liam asked her, "Why did you react like that to a simple question?" She blushed again, just as she had the first time they met. It was her strange peculiarity, Liam thought, that irritated him a little at times. And quietly she answered, "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure." "No way." Liam was so happy he fussed, sat her in the chair, looked into her eyes, and even ordered the servant to bring tea and milk. "That's great." He looked at her with such joyful eyes that Kathy cried from happiness. "But you're sure now?" "Yes," she nodded. "Let's go to the doctor tomorrow and find out for sure, okay?" Liam already imagined how he would solemnly present to his father the proof of his male achievements. The fact that he would soon become a father himself didn't excite Liam much. In fact, he was getting a little tired of Kathy. All these silly raptures on any occasion, absolute unsuitability for modern life. She even tried to clean the hotel. But here, could any normal person imagine such a thing? He remembered the face of the maid who had come to the room and found the rich guest dusting. It wasn't that Kathy disgusted him at all. Sometimes she was quite nice. All this naive innocence of hers had fascinated him at first, but the farther she was with him, the more he became irritated by her rudeness, her stupid simplicity, her complete lack of elementary ideas about anything. It was very stressful that everything had to be explained to her, chewed up the simplest, most obvious things. Yes, she didn't even know how to use a smartphone and woke up awfully early, disturbing his sleep, and in the evening she gave him no rest, dragging him from the bar to the hotel room, whining like a little girl. "Well, can we go now, honey?" "Don't call me that." One day he couldn't take it anymore and shouted at her. "What do you think I am, honey?" "Just call me Liam, whatever you say." Kathy readily agreed, and that annoyed him too. Her constant desire to please, to anticipate his every wish like an intrusive servant. "Lion, do you want tea? I can go and get it. The waiter brings the tea here." "And no, I don't want tea." "Waiter, a glass of Beaujolais, per favor." Kathy was embarrassed to go to the beach in her swimsuit. Liam literally dragged her out blushing like a cancer. They're all watching. Kathy looked at the people around her with tears in her eyes. Eventually converged on the floor transparent Perio. Liam felt like a loser who had married an ugly woman. Although Kathy was quite beautiful, and if she had been able to present herself, it would have been great, but that option was not available to her. And there were many other small details that were accumulating like a snowball. That's why today, when Liam learned that everything had worked out, and it was possible to give his father a ready report, so to speak, he rejoiced like a child. And Kathy thought he was happy as a child, without any how. Great son! James was indeed pleased with his report. They met in the office one-on-one. Liam wanted to present this news without Kathy, who was, in fact, only a tool to achieve the goal. And now that goal had been achieved, one could use something more serious for such news. My father was looking at the ultrasound photos, specially enlarged in A4 format. Liam had thought of it himself, specially asked the doctors. "You know, my father has poor eyesight, and I want to make the old man happy." Kathy again saw this as a touching family concern and smiled happily. "You know, I have unexpected news for you. The woman doctor smiled, raising her eyes from the monitor. "Look here." They both scrutinized the screen, not finding anything at all clear to them. "Right here, see." The woman pointed with a special wand, like a short pointer. "There should be one heartbeat here." "But we have two," she finished solemnly. Liam stared dumbly at the screen, not understanding anything, and Kathy, suddenly realizing the meaning of what had been said, gave her stupid habitual gasp and clamped her mouth shut, holding back happy sobs. "We're having twins." "Yes, and different egg twins at that," nodded the doctor. "What?" Liam was worried when he heard the terms he didn't understand at all. "Don't worry, there is nothing wrong with them." The doctor smiled. "They just developed from two different eggs and will not look like twins. They may even be opposite sexes." "Oh my God!" Kathy was overjoyed. "We are going to have two babies, Liam." She had forgotten that she shouldn't even call him that. But now he had something to surprise his father with. "Don't you see anything strange here?" he asked him, grinning. "What should I see?" James was wary, sensing a trick. "But I don't know." Liam said, "For example, that you'll soon be the grandfather of not one, but two grandchildren." "Really?" My father just soared above the sinful earth. He made the old man happy. He even hugged his son, which he hadn't done for a long time. And I think he even wept, or was it just Liam? "Adriana," he rushed to the intercom. "Adriana, my soul, bring us here the best champagne from that stock." "Son." The old man was shining like a shiny coin. "Son, you don't know how pleased I am. To tell you the truth, I doubted that you would be able to accomplish my little errand so quickly. But I was wrong, and for the first time in my life, I'm glad I was wrong. Ask all you want for such great news. That collector's Mustang, remember?" Liam squinted. "No problem." James threw up his hands. Not a question at all. The seductive Adriana, smiling and shooting her eyes at Liam, brought a fogged bucket with a green gold bottle. "Here you go. Did you have a good deal?" she asked, seeing that the chief was in a good mood. "Oh, yes," James said. "A very, very good one." "Well, son," he raised his glass as soon as the door closed behind the secretary. "To our family." Liam joined in the toast with gusto. The champagne was indeed excellent. The next day we had a family get-together with our relatives. The mother was delighted, as was the father, and she took Kathy to her room, and they clucked like two hens. Liam was generally very surprised to see his mother. Surely she had no country roots? The two of them had gotten together very quickly. Grandchildren. The father rumbled all over the hill. Two grandchildren at once. Wow, respect for the old man. Kathy's pregnancy went well. Village women with strong immune systems rarely had trouble bearing children. Liam expected her to become cranky and irritable like everyone in her position, but she hadn't changed a bit. She was still up early and eager to be active. She planted in the yard of the mansion a whole vegetable garden, digging in neat beds, treating her husband with ripe strawberries and young potatoes. But her husband was less and less at home, absorbed in the delights of his former free life. Kathy with her housekeeping and simple family pleasures, he was already madly bored. He became more and more annoyed to see her neatly coiffed and dressed in a homemade dress and impeccably ironed apron, fiddling in the kitchen, preparing dinners, baking pancakes. Lion was sick of seeing her contented face, of hearing her humming silly songs. Even the smell of her country food became disgusting to him at times, and he left home for a familiar old-time restaurant. Ordered sushi and a warm arugula salad. Another cocktail, met with old acquaintances, sat lazily sprawled out and listened to the usual coddling of street girls. He was well in his native familiar element and did not want to return to this cozy house, cleaned by the efforts of a young, diligent wife. Damn, what a mess he'd gotten himself into. But no, he was not going to lead the bland life of a married man. He, Liam, will be and will remain free. He would, as before, do what he wanted, take what was rightfully his, the rich women, the booze, the cars, and this village fool, nothing more than a domestic servant. But what annoyed him most of all was that Kathy never complained about anything. He wasn't at home all day long. Only occasionally he came in the morning, as they called it, on the horns and fell like a log into bed. Closer to dinner, with a woozy head, he would crawl to the first floor, where warm food, delicious tea, and his wife's smile were always waiting for him. Sometimes she worked in the vegetable garden to spite her big belly. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes she knitted or sewed. Sometimes she read on the terrace or in the garden. But never once did he find her idly lying on the sofa or watching television. The latest model of iPhone, which he had given her on their honeymoon, was always in the same place, carefully packed in a case so that it wouldn't spill out. For some reason, that fact annoyed Liam the most. "Why aren't you on the phone?" He reprimanded her during his rare moments at home. "I'm just doing some chores." Kathy justified herself shyly. "What if I need something urgently and I can't reach you?" "I'll probably hear you." "That's right, you probably would." "And I still haven't installed any messenger." "Do I have to text you like an idiot?" "Why?" Sincerely surprised Kathy. "If you need something, you can call and tell me. You're the one who can." Liam got upset. "But I'm a businessman, Vissy. You understand? It is often inconvenient for me to talk. I have business meetings and negotiations. Then can you please make me this messenger?" She asked him belittlingly. "Well, you give." Liam grinned. "Like a 100-year-old grandmother, let's do it yourself with your hands. At the same time, you will learn how to do it like all normal people." "But like me?" "Look on the internet." He cut her off and left. There was nothing to do, so she had to learn the internet and all sorts of messengers. The whole day, poor Kathy tortured herself trying to install on her phone different wise programs and applications, tired beyond belief. It all took away from her as much energy as she had never spent on any, even the most difficult housework. "Oh my gosh," she thought, "if their lives are so complicated, if everything Liam does takes so much energy, no wonder he's so tired and irritable. There must be some way to help him." But what can she do? Here in the house, it's just her and one other female au pair. True Kathy, accustomed to handling her own household, almost never asked her for anything herself. Only lately, when her stomach had gotten too much in the way, had the woman helped her in the garden. Maybe she knows something about these mobile wisdoms? "Wendy?" Kathy turned uncertainly to the housekeeper, who was sitting in a wicker chair on the terrace, sipping coffee and leafing through a magazine. "What?" Kathy turned around. "Can I help you?" "Wendy, you wouldn't happen to know how to handle this, would you?" "I know a little bit, like everyone else." She shrugged her shoulders. "Come on, what do you need?" Wendy was an ace compared to Kathy. She felt like a fish in water in the virtual world. She quickly taught the hostess all the subtleties of handling the iPhone. But she was not familiar with the laptop. "And you go to a special course." She advised Kathy. "They will teach you everything." Kathy thought about it. She had thought of self-education more than once. If now she lives in a big city, so it is necessary to try to somehow adapt here to get accustomed to these new conditions. Otherwise, she'll be a village idiot, When the children grow up, they'll be ashamed to have such a stupid mother. True, earlier she did not know how to approach it, but now she was going to do everything in her power. So when her father-in-law arrived once again and brought the doctor with him, he was very concerned about the medical part of Kathy's pregnancy. She shyly asked him, "James, I would like to enroll in a computer course. Why would you want to do that?" The man wondered. "To keep up with everyone else." Kathy explained, "Liam says I don't know how to do anything." "Ah, Liam?" The father-in-law stretched out. "I'll talk to him. And you, my dear, remember that now your main task is your children, my grandchildren. You should not overwork and sit near the monitor pregnant, harmful. Understand, when you give birth, when the kids grow up, then you're welcome. You can learn computer literacy and whatever else you want. Right, doctor?" He turned to the doctor. Their family doctor nodded, confirming James' words, and added, "With your permission, I would recommend Kathy's hospitalization in the clinic altogether." "Why?" James was concerned. "Is something threatening to the babies?" "Not threatening, no." The doctor hastened to assure him. But at this stage of the pregnancy, all sorts of unexpected things can happen at any time. And although Kathy is perfectly healthy and feeling well, both she and the babies should be under round-the-clock medical supervision. "That's something we can't provide at home." "Of course not." My father-in-law agreed. "Come on, Kathy. Let's go to the clinic." "For how long?" Kathy was confused. "Now until the birth." The doctor said firmly. He didn't want to have to answer to James if anything happened, and the clinic was more reliable. And although the girl was healthy and strong, it would never hurt to be reassured. When they were already in the car, Kathy quietly turned to her father-in-law. "James?" "Yes," he mumbled, not looking away from the screen of his smartphone. "Don't be too hard on Liam. He's not angry. He's worried about me, that he won't be able to contact me if he needs to." The man looked at her carefully and nodded, smiling slightly. What astonishing naivete and gullibility, he thought, and in his callous soul, first of all, her strict upbringing was having an effect. Secondly, in front of her eyes stood, as an example of her parents' life together, in which there was no place for tenderness and unnecessary sentiment. But still Kathy hoped and believed that Liam gave all his strength to work, caring for their well-being. Ah, if she had seen those very conditions and especially the implements of labor. But fortunately for her, for the time being, this dark side of their lives was safely hidden. And behind the high fence of the perinatal clinic, nothing threatened her and her children. She continued to feel fine. All her tests were normal, and nothing particularly bothered her, but she had a lot of free time on her hands, too much. For this reason she had, quite unnoticed by herself, gotten quite good at the internet and social networks. She could already communicate. She laughed for a long time at the emoticons when she discovered them. She had a lively correspondence with Wendy about the household she had left behind, and even set up Instagram on her own. But her whole, pure nature didn't give her a chance to get bogged down in sticky and utterly pointless videos. Therefore, her best entertainment was reading, listening to audiobooks, radio shows, and watching movies. But even these activities didn't take her entirely away. She walked a lot, remembering that children need fresh air, and in bad weather she sat wrapped in a warm blanket on the wide open balcony and drank hot tea. A little later, Kathy discovered that it was possible to learn computer literacy remotely. She gingerly asked her mother-in-law to bring her a laptop, promising that she would not spend too much time at the monitor, and the mother-in-law honored her request. Liam's mother, in general, in her own way attached to this kind and naive girl. After all, she gave her warmth and joy of communication, which she was completely deprived of in her family. At one time, Vanessa regretted that she had not given birth to another child besides her son, and it would have been possible to have several. The material conditions allowed already then, in the distant years of their youth with James. She really wanted a girl, a daughter, but her husband was not particularly in favor, and somehow it didn't work out. So now, having found in her daughter-in-law Kathy a loving and trusting soul, she was only glad. She has no daughter-in-law, but she has an affectionate and honest daughter-in-law, and soon she will have 2 grandchildren. Thinking of this, Vanessa, more than once, cried joyfully. 2 beautiful little lumps, her blood, the continuation of the family. The sex of the future twins, doctors, strangely enough, have not yet been able to find out. At each ultrasound, the babies turned to face each other, and all the most necessary places were inaccessible to the scanner. They don't want us to know in advance who will be born. Kathy said with a laugh, "I don't care, as long as they're both healthy." And Vanessa shared her opinion, hoping, however, that at least one of the babies would be a girl. She had already had the experience of raising a boy, a sad experience. What had she and James done wrong? Why had Liam grown up like that? Though deep down, of course, she knew why. The permissiveness that her husband practiced had had such an effect on the child's fragile soul, and she was very much afraid that the same thing might happen to her grandchildren. James was afraid of something else, that he wouldn't live to see his grandchildren born. Every day he was giving up more and more, and his wife began to notice it. He held on only on the medications he was given every day at the day hospital and on his iron will. Lung cancer in the last stage, no longer operable. And although the doctors from the very beginning, as the terrible diagnosis, gave him no more than 6 months, he has already held out more. And there were only 2 months left before his grandchildren were born, only 2 months. He wanted to see them so badly. This desire had become his obsession, to see their continuation, to see if they were like him, like his kind, to know that his blood was in them. Then he could die in peace, and he had no intention of giving up. Yes, the birth of these babies was eagerly awaited by most of the family, but not by their birth father. After a conversation with their father, when he'd said to him, "Why are you making your wife nervous? What she needs right now is some peace and quiet," he got even angrier. So his father didn't need him, Liam, not only the Kathy incubator, but he himself was nothing more than a tool for his father to ensure the continuation of the species, damn him, and Liam is off to the races. His hard work, which Kathy so often thought of with gratitude, consisted of uncontrollable drinking and daily social gatherings, where he often dabbled in drugs. Collector's Mustang, a gift from his father, he had already slightly broken, and so drove with a crumpled fender. There was no time to bring it to the service. The tools of his labor were slutty girls. While Kathy was at home, he didn't bring anyone there for fear of his father's anger. Now that she was hospitalized and the rookery, in the lingo of his circles, was free, he did not hesitate one day to bring his catch directly into the marital bedroom. At noon, Wendy nearly broke the dishes when she saw a half-naked girl in a Kathy robe open to the floor coming down the stairs. "What's for breakfast?" she asked, lighting a long, thin cigarette. That same evening, Wendy packed up her things and left. She wrote to Kathy that she was quitting for family reasons. Kathy was upset. Who would keep the house in order while she was away? Told her mother-in-law the next time she saw her. Vanessa, suspecting something wrong, went to the mansion to see what was wrong. The morning her son was supposed to have his 10th dream in his bed. He was indeed there, but in the same bed was also lying another girl. and there were empty bottles on the carpet. "Get up," Vanessa commanded, pouring the rest of the contents of one of the bottles on the head of the uninvited guest. "Ouch!" She shrieked and jumped up, batting her eyes. "Who are you?" "Mom." My son's eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" "I came to visit." "Kindly," explained the woman, sitting down on the chair. "To see how you're doing with the household. The housekeeper left you." "What is she?" Lion was surprised. "I'll tell you what." Finally, the mother boiled up. "And then I'll tell your father, too." "Let's see how you'll sing then." "Do you have any idea how you're insulting your wife with your behavior? The mother of your future children. And what will happen if she finds out about your outrageous behavior?" "That's it, that's it." Lion fought back against his mother. "Stop yelling, she was just leaving." "If only this could solve all your problems." Vanessa sighed. "I don't have any problems except for you." Lion shouted in anger. "I'm sick of your moralizing. I'm a grown man and I can live my life the way I want to." "Of course you can," nodded his mother. "But only at your own expense. Don't forget." Lion shrank back a little. "Let's make a deal like this." Vanessa said to her son, "that there will be no more outrage in the house. I can't control your whole life. I don't need to. But Kathy and your children deserve much better treatment, so you will no longer throw out the servants and bring your girls here. Look, if I ever hear about this again, I'll tell my father and he'll take away your allowance. I hope you understand me well?" "Yes," Lion mumbled. "I do. I couldn't be better." "Good." Vanessa got up from her chair. "Oh, and don't forget to call Wendy and bring her back. When Kathy comes in with the babies, the place should be in perfect order." James was lying in a hospital bed at the daycare center, covered in tubes. It was a good thing all his hair had come out a long time ago, and now he didn't have to explain the sudden baldness to anyone, whenever it happened. "Oh, this is so lousy." The pounding in his temples, the ringing in his ears, the darkness in his eyes, but he seemed to be holding on for now. How much longer? How long does he have? Who can say? As if hearing his thoughts, the doctor entered the room. "How are we doing, James?" "Not so good. I have to say that with your diagnosis and the length of treatment, you're still hanging in there. Good for you." The doctor smiled encouragingly. "But unfortunately, the latest tests." "What?" "I'm finished?" James grinned sadly. "You need to go to a hospital." The doctor said trustingly, "so that we can give you round-the-clock care." "In other words, lay down to die," sighed James. "No, you won't." He got out of bed, but not as quickly as he would have liked. He felt dizzy and had to grab the headboard to catch his breath. "James, where are you going?" "You can't." The doctor started, but the stubborn patient did not listen to him and dialed the chauffeur's number. 5 minutes later, he was escorted to the car, and in another 20 minutes, he was already in the perinatal clinic. "Hello, daughter-in-law." Roughly and cheerfully, he said, "Kathy," opening the door. "Good afternoon." Kathy smiled. How good of them to warn me of a visitor. She rejoiced a moment ago, barely having time to hide her laptop. "How are you doing in here?" Her father-in-law stepped closer to her to kiss her cheek, and she involuntarily felt the pungent hospital spirit emanating from him. "Are you not feeling well?" she asked, looking into his gaunt face, into the dark circles under his eyes. "I can't hide anything from you." James laughed and immediately coughed, shaking from the painful spasms. After a little while, he got his breath back and began to speak. "I did not want to tell any of you, so as not to upset or frighten you. But my days are numbered, Kathy. The doctors have only given me 6 months to live, and I'm already 2 years too long. My last wish is to see my grandchildren while I'm still alive. Don't interrupt me, please. He made a hand sign, seeing that she was about to say something to him. Let me finish. So, Kathy, since I can hardly hold them in my arms anymore, I must at least do what I can for them and for you too. So I've decided to make a will. It'll be done in the most honorable way possible. Most of my fortune will go to my grandchildren, and you will manage their estate until they are 18 years old. But why me and not Liam? Kathy couldn't help but interject. She had always been taught not to interrupt her elders, but this speech had struck her, stirred her. Liam? My father-in-law smirked sadly and wickedly. I will not forget him either. He is my son, after all. But I'll tell you frankly, Kathy, I'm not sure he can handle my financial empire. You don't realize the size of it, and relax, you'll have help managing your children's fortunes. I have a trusted staff and lawyers who will draw up the paperwork in a way that won't hurt a mosquito. So, I ask you one thing. Promise me, girl, that you will do everything in your power, and even beyond that, to bring up my grandchildren worthy people. Of course I will, Kathy said hotly. Of course, Daddy, don't worry about that. James and Vanessa will be brought up in love and strictness. What? My father-in-law couldn't believe his ears. What did you say? Or did I mishear? No. His daughter-in-law smiled at him. You heard right, Daddy. We're naming them James and Vanessa. I'm not as stupid as everyone thinks I am, and I'm well aware that this is all. She waved her hand around. All these opportunities, it's all you're doing. And your wife, she is also a very good person. I love her like my own mother. Daughter, wept father-in-law, embracing her and pressing his wrinkled wet cheek. Daughter, but where are you from? I know, Kathy assured him. I know it's a boy and a girl. Mommy always knows these things. That's how Vanessa caught them when she entered the room. They were crying and hugging each other. Of course, they told her about her husband's illness, because there was nothing to hide. In general, she was going to tell James about her son's outrageous behavior and looked for him in the office, where she was told that he had gone to the clinic to Kathy. But now, of course, that conversation never happened. Together with Kathy, they did persuade This is William, said the father-in-law to his daughter-in-law. He'll be helping you with all your business. You have some papers to sign now. Can I read them? Kathy asked. Of course, Kathy, nodded William. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them all. And please, just call me William. Kathy carefully read everything that needed to be signed. Do I understand correctly that you, Dad, are appointing me CEO of your company? She wondered. After all, I am only a woman, and I have no education, and then, what about Liam? It is my right to appoint as the head of my own company whoever I see fit. Her father-in-law interrupted her with the same unappealing tone. Liam is not up to the task, to my great regret, but you, with the help of William and other loyal employees, can. You, as the representative of my grandchildren, will have a controlling interest. And please don't tell my husband yet. I'll tell him myself. Kathy left her father-in-law almost in shock. No, of course she had already begun to suspect that Liam was not as fond of her as she had thought at first. He never showed up at the clinic again. He didn't answer her calls and messages, and Wendy told her some things. Kathy cried all night, but by nature, strong in body and spirit, she calmed down and accepted it in the morning. After all, she had never once seen in the village with her own eyes the same unearthly love that is written about in books and dreamed of by every girl. But Kathy? When he woke up, he didn't immediately remember what had happened in the morning. "How long have you been here?" "I dozed off." "Did you sleep well, Daddy?" his daughter-in-law asked him. "I'm glad. Now let's drink this. Who was here with you just now?" James finally remembered. "Some old woman, a little woman?" "That's my grandmother. She came at my request. I hope you don't mind." She still called her father-in-law by her first or second name, depending on the situation. Baba Kathy can heal with herbs and hands, remove spoil, help with the evil eye. She cured my younger brother of a stupor. People come from all over the neighborhood to see her, and she never refuses anyone. "You know, I feel better today," James replied. It was as if he had forgotten his original question. "I feel invigorated. What did you give me to drink?" "Herbal tincture." Kathy smiled. "Thyme, chamomile, St. John's wort, soothing." "It really soothes." My father-in-law perked up. "And even, kind of invigorating." "Well, how are you?" "What did the doctor say?" "How long do we have to wait?" "Not much longer." "Another week, maybe a week and a half." "Oh, I wish we could wait," sighed my father-in-law. "I wish we could wait." But that evening Kathy felt a pain in her lower abdomen. At first a tugging, exhausting pain, then sharp, like a knife stabbing. Startled out of her wits, she pressed the staff call button. What? A nurse came in and saw Kathy and splashed her hands. "Looks like it started. It's too early, too early." Kathy moaned, lifting herself up on the bed. "Ouch! What's that?" Her water broke. The nurse said, pulling back the sheet, "Call the midwives." "Oh my goodness, get up, get up." "That's it, and let's walk around the room. It will be easier and faster. If the pain is sharp, lean on the bed, but do not lie down, do not lie down." "Okay?" "Yeah." Kathy nodded. "It feels better." "It's supposed to. It's all right, but it's going to hurt. It's normal, just bear with it." By 1 o'clock in the morning, Kathy refused the anesthesia, thinking it would hurt the babies. "No, it won't. The impact is minimal." The doctors persuaded her, but she wouldn't give up. By 3, they arranged a concilium, and after examining her again, took her to a separate unit. Lying on a special table, Kathy did, as she had been taught in the training group, endured and breathed. Patience and breathing again. "Colleagues, I believe we should do a cesarean." The older of the doctors with the beard listened worriedly to Kathy's pulse. "Risk factor, twins. No C-section." Barely able to cope with the pain, Kathy wheezed, "Soon enough." Half an hour later, the first baby was born healthy and screaming. The second one followed 6 minutes apart. The babies were remarkably healthy. "You, Mommy, well done," approvingly said to her nurse of the maternity ward. All such moms would be patient. Kathy and would like to answer her something, but could not. Her eyes were literally closing from fatigue. After both babies had been laid on her for a couple of minutes, and she had hugged them and whispered something affectionate in their ears, her strength had completely left her. Kathy awoke, unaccustomedly late. The sun was already high above the horizon. Recovering, she turned her head. Next to her bed were 2 glass cradles, and in each tightly sung and quietly sniffing a small living lump. Kathy got up cautiously, walked over to them, and watched them sleep for a long time, smiling. There was a quiet knock on the door, and the nurse slipped in. "You awake, Mommy? You have visitors." Vanessa came into the room, radiant and joyful, followed by the unusually quiet and cautious Liam, carrying a huge bouquet of roses. and behind him, Kathy couldn't believe her eyes. Her father-in-law was in a wheelchair, already shining like a shiny light bulb. "Didn't expect to see me?" James laughed, and then he coughed, but not hard. "Where are my little darlings?" Who's Kathy?" "Who's who?" She smiled. "No change, just like we agreed." And with a wave of her hand, she named them one by one. "James and Vanessa Brown. Please meet them." "Congratulations." Liam came up to her and kissed her awkwardly on the cheek. "Here, this is for you." He held out the bouquet. "Lisa, put it in the vase, please." Indifferently, looking at the pink armful, asked Kathy Nurse. "And congratulations to you," she said to her husband. "How cute they are." The mother-in-law smiled, leaning over the cradles. "And soon they will be able to see them closer?" Cautiously asked father-in-law, who also moved closer to the grandchildren. "We'll see them now." Kathy laughed. "But they're asleep." Protesting, Vanessa said. "That's okay," smiled Kathy. "Healthy babies sleep soundly, and besides, it's time for me to feed them." She deftly took one by one the babies, and putting them on the changing table, unwrapped them from their diapers. "Here, look at us." Little Brown yawned and pulled up like kittens and squeaked just as pitifully and thinly. "My breed," said the satisfied father-in-law when the boy squeezed the finger offered him by his grandfather with his clinging hand. "Well, hello, namesake, and who is this princess?" He would have traded on his grandchildren for a long time, but Vanessa tugged him by the sleeve. "Let's go already. The babies need to be fed, Kathy." "Oh, yes, of course." The father-in-law hustled to turn around, the nurse helped him quickly, and all the visitors disappeared behind the ward door. And Liam never said anything else. After a week, Kathy and the babies were discharged home, where they were cared for by 2 helpers and her mother-in-law. She practically moved in with them to help Kathy. In fact, the young mother needed minimal help. The children were so calm, and she herself was such a grip that she could probably have done without help at all. Liam arrived home neatly by 8 o'clock in the evening and almost always sober. He politely inquired about their day, and after looking at the children, retired to his room. Kathy moved with the twins into a larger room overlooking the sunny side of the garden. The father-in-law, who was stable, calm, and in no great pain, was often brought in. He showered them with gifts, and one day told Kathy this. "Kathy, while I was in the clinic, I once had a strange dream, as if a strange old woman came to my room at dawn and laid her hands on my head. And immediately I felt so calm, so warm. From that day I recovered and went on the mend, and your herb helps well." Kathy didn't tell her father-in-law how it was, and her grandmother didn't tell her to spread the word. And Wendy, who had come into the house again, marveled at her mistress. You could see our country folk, whatever she undertakes, everything is done. She was praising Kathy on the phone, and Kathy overheard her. "Where are you Wendy from?" she asked her assistant. "Woodbury Heights. There's a village. Maybe you've heard of it." "I don't think so." Kathy wondered, "And I don't think you've heard of ours. Addicts." It's been 3 months since the babies were born when James got worse again. The prognosis was unfavorable. The doctors frowned. Probably a few more days, maybe 2 weeks. Kathy and Vanessa cried. Drove to the clinic where they had put him again, sat beside each day grieving. Kathy called the village and asked her grandmother. Maybe she would treat her father-in-law one more time. But the grandmother, who spoke on the phone, very reluctantly, conveyed to her mother that she had taken sin on her soul last time, and now there was nothing to be done. On the day of his death, James felt better, even ate a little. He talked to his relatives, apologized to them if he had offended them. Liam's lips curved, but he didn't say anything to his father. At 21 o'clock, James Brown, the founder and permanent head of his financial empire, died peacefully, surrounded by family and friends. That's what the newspapers said in the obituaries. A huge crowd gathered for the funeral. All employees, business partners, various necessary people, representatives of the authorities, and a bunch of relatives and friends. The son showed up drunk and even managed to miss, throwing a clod of earth on his father's coffin. "Bastard," Vanessa said to him and cried. He tried to say something in a stammering voice, but Kathy came up and said quietly, "Please don't go away. Mother's having a hard enough time as it is. You'll come back later and apologize. You bastard." The drunken husband was indignant. "I'll get you." And he tried to hit Kathy, but slipped on the slippery clay soil and fell into the cemetery mud. He cursed, looked at his greasy clay-stained black gussie suit, got up and walked away. A couple of days later, he showed up at night with a young girl and, grinning drunkenly, told Kathy that she was going to live here. "This is my house. It's all mine, you understand?" He yelled, "And your place is in the pigsty. Go back to your stinking village. I've had enough of you. Speak quietly, please. The children are asleep." "Calm down," Kathy told him, and then handed the keys to the mansion to the maiden, who looked at the scene with insolent, drunken eyes. "Take them. I take it you'll be running the place from now on." "Good night." She turned and went to her room, locking the door. "Hey, you!" her husband yelled after her. "Come back immediately, we'll talk. What are you doing with the keys to my house, huh?" He tried to follow her up the stairs, but could not do it. His legs did not obey him. To hell with her. He waved his hand and staggered to the refrigerator. "Do you want a beer?" The girl didn't refuse to keep him company. Early in the morning, Kathy, with the twins in her arms, squeamishly turned away and walked past the huge leather sofa in the hall where the couple had settled, unable to find the strength to climb the stairs to the bedroom. The cab took them to her mother-in-law's mansion, and Kathy never returned to her first family nest again. By late afternoon, a waking Liam was pelting her with calls and texts, demanding she return and bring his children, threatening her with swift reprisal in every possible way. Kathy texted him that she was ready to meet at the company office to discuss the terms of the divorce. Who did she think she was? He was furious, methodically throwing dishes from the cupboard onto the floor. "What divorce? I'll leave her without everything." No, what an idiot full of idiots. She doesn't even remember that she signed a prenup. Elsa, his young mistress, looked indifferently at his rage. She didn't care about anything at all. And soon Liam received an official notice from the lawyer about the beginning of divorce proceedings. "Dan, it's Michael, our office lawyer." Liam stared at the text in bewilderment. Is he out of his mind? And rushed to call the lawyer, but he only correctly repeated the dry wording. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Liam yelled into the phone. "Do you know that now I am in charge of the office and everywhere else?" The lawyer assured him that he was fully aware of all the facts, and advised Liam to take a closer look at his email. "You must have missed another email in the same folder, Liam," the lawyer said. "There's also a notice about the announcement of your father's will." "What?" Liam marveled. "What the hell will?" Yelping and grunting, he went through the mail again and indeed found the document he was looking for, but the information in it was only the same, only with the specification of the place and time of the appointed procedure. Kathy and Vanessa, meanwhile, were fully immersed in the simple pleasures of home. Under reliable protection in the family mansion, they spent the whole day with the children, took walks, baked cakes, and generally enjoyed the peace and company of each other. They invited Wendy, who had no intention of staying at Liam's house. It's a terrible thing to do. She complained to Kathy, not realizing she was hurting her. Every day there's debauchery, drinking, and naked girls. Ah, mark my words, Kathy, he won't end well. Often in the 2 weeks that remained before the elder Brown's will was read, William came to the mansion, and he and Kathy discussed things at length, poring over papers. The lawyer was also in attendance, and even the notary was brought in. Vanessa, preoccupied with her grandchildren, didn't even wonder what was going on. Mostly she already knew everything. Her husband had told her before his death exactly how he had disposed of his fortune, and she wasn't that interested in the details. On the appointed day and hour, all interested parties arrived at Brown's office. In the parking lot in front of the building, there was no place to fall, and the guards were exhausted, checking according to the established protocol every car coming in. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the presiding member of the board of directors began. Let me welcome you all today on this solemn and mournful day, when we must first of all express once again our sincere sadness at the passing of our deeply respected founding father, Brown James. I ask those present to stand and honor his memory with a moment of silence. Everyone rose, lowered their heads, and stood in silence until the chairman rang the bell. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now let me begin the extraordinary meeting of the Board of Directors of the Joint Stock Company Stavka. The agenda. While the agenda was read out, which took quite a long time, Kathy sat immersed in her thoughts and almost did not hear anything. For the umpteenth time she asked herself the same question, whether she was doing the right thing, whether she had not abused too much the trust of an old, sick, dying man who had given her and her children so many opportunities and at the same time imposed such enormous responsibilities. Will she be able to cope with this heavy burden? And let me now introduce you to our new chairman of the board of directors. Kathy heard the words of the speaker. Liam, who was sitting almost opposite her at the huge, polished mahogany oval table, grinned contentedly and wickedly, preparing to stand up to general applause. Today he was surprisingly sober and in normal shape, shaved, combed, in an impeccably ironed navy blue suit, probably from some brand. Safu didn't know much about them. He wore a snow-white shirt and a beautiful tie with a fashionable paisley pattern. Now please, Brown Kathy, a round of applause, gentlemen. The gentlemen clapped, amazed as much as Liam, whose eyes were almost popping out of their orbits and his hands were treacherously trembling. Kathy stood up proudly, straightened to her short height, and raised her chin. Please take note. The speaker spoke. Kathy has been appointed CEO of the company by an order dated, and he gave the date. Signed by the former CEO, James Brown. Those who wish to read it may do so. A copy of the order was passed around. People read it, quietly expressing their bewilderment, and passed it on. We will now turn the floor over to our esteemed notary, who will read the deceased's will to us. Kathy sat back in her seat, and her mother-in-law, sitting next to her, squeezed her hand encouragingly under the table. The notary, too, started from afar and spent a long time reading out the tediously long wording. Finally, he got to the point. To my son, Brown Liam, I bequeath 10% of the authorized capital of a limited liability company and a block of shares in a joint stock company in the amount of 5% of the total number of ordinary and 2% of preferred shares. Liam, in a silent frenzy, broke the Parker pen lying on the table in front of him, and the ink spilled out onto the tabletop and onto the sleeve of his snow-white shirt, spreading out in an ugly blot. To my wife, Brown Vanessa, I bequeath. Then came the enumeration of shares, amounts, and various types of movable and immovable property. The deceased did not forget about his leading employees, describing to them a bit of shares so that they would not be remembered. And finally, the notary got to the main part of the will. I bequeath the rest of my estate, whatever it may consist of, and wherever located, to my grandchildren, Brown James and Brown Vanessa, in equal shares each. And to this wording the notary deemed it necessary to clarify. Including the controlling interest in the joint stock company Stavka, until the majority of the main heirs and their executor and manager of all property is appointed their mother, Brown Kathy. That's a hell of a thing. Suddenly Liam shouted out and abruptly stood up, throwing his chair away. The people sitting next to him recoiled in fright. I will appeal against this farce. Father would never do such a thing. I assure you that the will has been drawn up in full form on the appropriate form, has been recorded in the electronic registry of the Unified Notary System, and has been properly authenticated. Important, said the notary. I don't give a damn about your registers. Liam shouted in his voice. You've got a snake on your chest. He suddenly pulled out a small revolver and pointed it at Kathy. Stop, you bastard, he said quietly and violently. The people scattered out of the office in panic. Only the notary alone sat unperturbed and glued to his seat. Papers were in disarray, lying on the desk and on the floor, and the panic was terrible. Kathy sat staring at the muzzle of the gun pointed at her, growing monstrously larger, coming closer and closer to her, and becoming horribly, horribly like a black hole. What about the children? A thought flashed through her mind, and it gave her strength. With an abrupt movement, she wriggled like a snake and slid onto the chair under the table, dragging her mother-in-law behind her with a jerk. The chair on which Vanessa was sitting fell, and she fell with it. Almost simultaneously a gunshot sounded. Again there was running, the noise of fighting, the clinking of breaking dishes. When the police and security guards, who arrived on a call, rushed into the office, Liam was already lying face down on the floor, with his hands tied with office twine, pressing the torso of the defeated criminal, with his foot to the floor, financial consultant William towering over him. And two frightened women sat under the desk, hugging each other. And the notary sat like Buddha at a small table opposite the window, guarding the will entrusted to him. Liam was in prison for 7 years for attempted murder and drug possession. Kathy took the late Brown Sr.'s place and soon learned to steer her financial ship with confidence. Partners and colleagues changed their minds 3 months after her appointment when, sensing a volatile situation on the stock market, she made a very controversial decision to sell some of the shares, and as a result their quotations rose significantly. William, her first assistant and loyal beau, is courting her, and Kathy likes it, but she is in no hurry to say yes to a man in love. The twins are growing up, and Vanessa, looking at her grandson, often cries, seeing in him a copy of her promiscuous son. But Kathy, with an iron hand, manages her wayward son, not letting him get away with it. Perhaps she will be able to do what the older Browns failed to do, to grow from a small child, a big and real man.